Before we start, make sure you're warm, safe, and settled. No need to stay awake. This is your permission to doze off. We'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop a comment if you'd like to share. Ancient Rome, a place where grandeur was measured in marble and ambition knew no bounds. Right at the heart of this empire's architectural bravado stands the Colosseum, an arena that makes today's stadiums look like kiddie pools. Think of it as the ultimate flex by Emperor Vespasian, who decided in 72 AD that Rome needed something more than just aqueducts and public baths. Why settle for indoor plumbing when you can have a monument to your own power and benevolence? Vespasian was no fool. He knew that if he wanted to win the hearts of the Roman populace, all roads led not just to Rome, but to entertainment, and what better way to entertain than with a colossal amphitheatre? Now, this wasn't just any amphitheatre. It was a marvel of engineering and excess, one that would take nearly a decade to complete and eventually have room for 50,000 to 80,000 spectators, depending on whether you count standing room. The construction was a feat of manpower and resources. It required over 100,000 cubic metres of travertine stone, quarried from Tivoli and transported by a labour force that probably didn't receive any overtime pay. Slave labour was the engine of this construction juggernaut, and they didn't have the benefit of hard hats or labour unions. But hey, who needs safety protocols when you've got the will of the gods and an emperor breathing down your neck? The cost of this grand project? Well, let's just say it was enough to make even the most lavish Super Bowl halftime show blush. Estimates suggest that the construction cost was in the ballpark of 40 million sesterces. For context, a Roman soldier earned about 900 sesterces a year. So yes, this was the kind of spending that would make even the most extravagant modern governments look like penny pinchers. But, like any ambitious politician, Vespasian saw this as an investment in his legacy. He wasn't just building a stadium, he was constructing a symbol of Roman might and his own magnanimity. What better way to distract from the fact that he came to power after a year of civil war than by offering free gladiatorial games and spectacles? The Colosseum, or the Flavian Amphitheatre as it was originally known, was an exercise in public relations, wrapped in stone and mortar. It was Rome's way of saying, sure, we've had a bumpy political road lately, but hey, look at this amazing new building. It's like when modern cities build Olympic venues to show the world they've got their act together, only with more lions and fewer synchronized swimmers. The political motivations were clear: keep the people entertained, and they'll be less likely to notice the cracks in the empire's foundation. Speaking of cracks, the Colosseum's construction was not without its challenges. The builders had to contend with the marshy land where the amphitheatre was to be situated. Draining the area was no small task, but this was Rome, where engineering met determination with impressive results. Once the foundation was secured, up rose the iconic arches and columns, each one a testament to Roman engineering prowess. The Colosseum eventually stood at a height of 159 feet, making it the tallest ancient Roman structure. It was like the Empire State Building of its time, except it hosted chariot races instead of corporate offices. But the grandeur of the Colosseum wasn't just in its size, it was also in its design. There were 80 entrances, which allowed for the kind of crowd control that modern event planners would envy. The seating was meticulously organized to reflect the rigid social hierarchy of Rome. Senators got the best seats naturally, while women and slaves were relegated to the nosebleed section, proof that even in ancient Rome some things never change. And then there was the velarium, an enormous awning that could be drawn over the seating area to protect spectators from the sun. Think of it as the ancient world's version of air conditioning, minus the electricity and comfort. The Colosseum wasn't just a place for gladiator games and animal hunts, it was also a stage for naval battles, known as naumachii. Yes, you heard right. The Romans would flood the arena and reenact famous naval battles. Talk about going the extra mile to impress your audience. These spectacles required complex engineering to fill and drain the arena, all to ensure that the average Roman could enjoy a day at the Colosseum without getting their sandals wet. Today you might get a t-shirt or a bobblehead at a game, but back then you got to see a full-scale naval engagement. So, while the Colosseum was undoubtedly a monument to human achievement, it was also a testament to human folly. Vespasian and his successors understood that architecture was as much about politics as it was about aesthetics. Knowing that, it's little wonder that the Colosseum became a symbol of Rome itself, representing both its glory and its hubris. The real wonder isn't just that it was built, but that it survived everything history threw at it, from earthquakes to the eventual fall of Rome. It stands today as a reminder of a time when empires were built on stone and spectacle, when bread and circuses were the keys to power. So next time you're at a modern stadium, soaking up the amenities and marvelling at the giant screens, spare a thought for the Colosseum. It was the original template for all the grand arenas that followed, a place where the stakes were life and death, and the halftime show involved actual lions. In a way, every stadium is a tribute to that Roman vision of entertainment as a tool of statecraft. While the Colosseum may have been Rome's showstopper, the real unsung hero of the empire was its road network. Yes, the legendary Roman roads, the ancient world's equivalent of a well-oiled internet, connecting cities and civilizations like no other. If the Colosseum was the blockbuster movie, then the roads were the fiber-optic cables that made sure everybody could get there in time for the lion-fueled matinee. Let's start by debunking the myth right out of the gate. Sure, all roads led to Rome, but not because Rome was the ultimate weekend getaway spot. The truth is, far more practical and, dare I say, less glamorous. These roads were built to keep the empire's sprawling territories under a tight Roman grip, ensuring that legions, messengers, and tax collectors could whiz across the landscape faster than you can say, Carthago delenda est. Picture this. By the 2nd century AD, the Romans had laid down over 250,000 miles of road. That's enough to circle the globe 10 times over. Talk about an ambitious infrastructure project. And we're not talking about your average dirt path here. Roman roads were the interstate highways of their day, complete with a meticulous design that would make even the most OCD engineer shed a tear of pride. These roads were built to last, using a multi-layered approach that started with a deep trench. The base layer, known as the statumen, was filled with large stones for stability. Next came the rudus, a layer of smaller stones mixed with lime to create a concrete-like consistency. The nucleus followed, a mixture of gravel and sand to smooth things out. Finally, the summum dorsum, or top layer, was made of tightly fitted paving stones, polished to a sheen that could rival your grandma's dining room floor. And here's a fun fact, those iconic straight lines Roman roads are famous for? They weren't just a flex of their surveying skills. They were strategic, designed to let Roman soldiers march in a straight line, ready for battle at the drop of a helmet. Sure, that makes for a great marching song, but it also means they weren't exactly taking the scenic route. When in Rome, efficiency trumps aesthetics. Now, let's talk about the economic impact. These roads weren't just for show, they were the arteries of commerce, pumping goods and services across the empire like a well-oiled machine. By reducing travel times, they allowed for the rapid movement of everything from olive oil and wine to slaves and soldiers. A trader could potentially shave weeks off travel time, which in the ancient world was like discovering teleportation. And let's not forget the tax revenue. Roads meant more efficient tax collection, and in Rome, taxes were as certain as death and, well, gladiator games. Of course, we can't ignore the fact that for all their legendary status, these roads had a darker side. Building them wasn't exactly a walk in the park. The labour was grueling, often carried out by slaves and soldiers who probably didn't sign up for a lifetime of road work. And if you think your local government's road maintenance delays are bad, spare a thought for those ancient workers who had to deal with primitive tools and harsh conditions. No wonder some of them took a detour into rebellion. In terms of social impact, these roads were the great levelers of the Roman world. They connected far-flung provinces, facilitating cultural exchange and the spread of Roman law and language. But they also made it easier for Rome to impose its will on conquered territories, stamping out local customs in favour of Romanization. So, while they were a marvel of engineering, they were also a tool of control and assimilation. And let's not forget the roadside attractions. No, not the world's largest ball of twine, but the mansiones and mutationes. These were the ancient equivalent of motels and gas stations, providing weary travellers with places to rest and change horses. Imagine stopping at a rest area where instead of fast food you got a hearty bowl of lentils and a pat on the back for surviving another day on the road. So while the Roman roads were indeed the veins of the empire, Carrying lifeblood to its farthest reaches, they were also a reminder of Rome's iron-fisted rule. They were built for speed and control, not for the love of travel or exploration. The reality is that Rome wasn't interested in scenic drives. It was focused on swift domination and efficient administration. In the end, the roads were both a testament to Roman ingenuity and a symbol of its unyielding ambition. They paved the way for an empire that would span continents, an empire that could claim, with some justification, that all roads indeed led to Rome. But beneath the polished veneer of stone lay a sobering truth. These roads were as much about power as they were about progress, a reminder that sometimes the path to glory is paved with more than just good intentions. And on that note, hold on to your togas, because there's more to uncover about the roads, the empire, and the people who travelled them. We'll continue our journey through Rome's architectural and engineering genius, revealing the layers of history that make this ancient civilization both fascinating and, at times, frighteningly familiar. Stay tuned, because the road ahead is full of twists, turns, and even a few potholes. As we continue our jaunt through Rome's engineering marvels, let's take a moment to pour one out for the aqueducts, those unsung heroes of Roman infrastructure that quietly did the heavy lifting while the Colosseum hogged the spotlight. While gladiators were busy entertaining the masses, the aqueducts were ensuring they had water to wash off all that dust and gore. They were the silent workhorses behind Rome's grandeur, but unlike your average celebrity, they didn't rely on scandal to stay relevant. Now, the very idea of an aqueduct might not sound as thrilling as a lion versus gladiator smackdown, but these structures were the real game changers. Picture a city with 1 million residents. Yep, Rome was that bustling, and you'll quickly realize that getting enough fresh water was more than just a luxury, it was a necessity. Without aqueducts, the Romans would have been up a creek without a paddle, so to speak. Forget imperial opulence, this was about survival and sanitation, not showing off with water features in the emperor's backyard. The Romans, never ones to do things by halves, constructed 11 major aqueducts over the course of 500 years, spanning a total of about 260 miles. That's a lot of Roman ingenuity channeling water from distant springs, all so that citizens could enjoy public baths, fountains, and, let's face it, a drinkable vintage of the local vino. These aqueducts were a testament to Roman engineering prowess, with gravity doing most of the work. The Romans were all about that downhill flow, baby. Let's talk specifics. The Aqua Appia, Rome's first aqueduct, was built in 31 BC. It stretched about 10 miles, but most of it was underground. It was like the stealth bomber of aqueducts, efficiently delivering water without making a scene. Then came the Aqua Annio Vetus in 272 BC, adding another 40 miles to the water network. By the time the Aqua Claudia and the Aqua Marcia rolled around, the Romans had mastered the art of turning water into a flowing spectacle. The Aqua Claudia in particular was a marvel, taking 14 years to construct and stretching over 45 miles. Imagine the engineering equivalent of a marathon that just kept on going. The cost of these projects was no small matter. The Aqua Claudia alone was estimated to cost around 30 million sesterces. Remember that a Roman soldier's annual pay was roughly 900 sesterces, so this was the kind of expenditure that could put a serious dent in the imperial piggy bank. Yet, for Rome, this was an investment in public health and urban growth, not just a chance to flex architectural muscle. Unlike today's infrastructure projects that get stuck in red tape, the Romans knew that for an empire to thrive, it needed more than just bread and circuses. It needed water, and lots of it. While aqueducts were essential, let's not pretend they were all about altruism. Sure, they brought water to the masses, but they also made sure the emperor's palaces and the elite's villas had their share. In a city where status was everything, having your own private water supply was the ultimate flex. It's like having a personal Wi-Fi network when everyone else is stuck on dial-up. So, while aqueducts brought clean water to public baths, they also ensured that the upper crust could luxuriate in their private pools without having to mingle with the hoi polloi. And let's not forget the social impact. These aqueducts didn't just deliver water, they also carried Roman culture and civilization with them. As they extended their reach, they brought Roman standards of hygiene and urban planning to the provinces. It was like a waterborne version of cultural imperialism, ensuring that even the farthest flung corners of the empire were awash in Roman influence. The aqueducts were as much about spreading Roman ideals as they were about quenching thirst. Of course, the Romans had their fair share of plumbing woes. While they were adept at bringing water in, getting rid of waste was another story. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, was supposed to handle the dirty work, but let's just say it wasn't always up to the task. The Tiber River often bore the brunt of this inadequacy, turning into something of a liquid landfill. So, while the aqueducts were a marvel, they were also part of a system that didn't quite have all its pipes in a row. And let's bust a myth while we're at it. The Romans didn't invent aqueducts. The idea of channeling water over long distances was already in play in places like ancient Persia and Greece. What the Romans did was perfect the concept, turning it into an art form. They took existing ideas and made them their own, a bit like how modern tech companies innovate by rebranding existing technology. The Romans were masters of adaptation, taking the best of what was out there and making it work on an imperial scale. In the end, the aqueducts were more than just stone and water. They were a statement, a declaration that Rome was not just a city, but a civilization, one that could bend nature to its will. They showed the world that Rome wasn't just about conquering lands. It was about creating an urban environment where life could flourish. The aqueducts were the veins of this living city, pumping life and vitality into its heart. So next time you turn on the tap, spare a thought for those ancient engineers who made it possible. They may not have had the convenience of modern plumbing, but they laid the foundation for it. The aqueducts were Rome's gift to the world, a reminder that sometimes the most essential innovations are the ones that flow quietly beneath the surface. And as we leave the aqueducts behind, remember, there's more to uncover about Rome's architectural genius. Our journey through the empire's feats of engineering isn't over yet. Stay tuned for more tales of Roman innovation, where the stakes were high and the ambitions even higher. Before we plunge into the grandeur of the Pantheon, let's take a moment to shift gears from the utilitarian prowess of aqueducts to something that tickles the architectural fancy. Rome's audacious attempt at blending religion with engineering. Enter the Pantheon, a structure so iconic it makes modern attempts at wow-factor architecture look like they're playing with Lego bricks. The Pantheon is like the Swiss Army knife of ancient Rome's architectural feats. Built initially by Marcus Agrippa in 27 BC, it got its famous facelift under Emperor Hadrian around 126 AD. This was no mere facelift, though. It was a top-to-bottom makeover that would make even the most seasoned reality TV renovators blush. Here's the kicker: despite its temple-like appearance, the Pantheon wasn't just dedicated to Roman gods. Oh no, it was a multifunctional masterpiece that served a variety of purposes, including a political stage and a social gathering hub. Think of it as Rome's original multi-purpose venue, a little bit of temple, a little bit of town hall, and a whole lot of architectural showboating. Now, about its enduring allure. The Pantheon's most jaw-dropping feature is its dome, a 142-foot wide, 142-foot tall wonder that has managed to survive nearly 2,000 years of earthquakes, invasions, and general historical mayhem. It's like the world's most durable upside-down salad bowl. The Romans didn't have reinforced concrete or steel beams, but they did have a secret weapon, a volcanic wonder material called pozzolana. This natural cement, mixed with lime and water, allowed them to build a dome that was not only massive, but also remarkably lightweight. It's like they figured out how to make feather-light concrete long before modern engineers had the chance to scratch their heads over it. The Pantheon's oculus, an open-air 27-foot hole at the dome's apex, is the piece de resistance. It's the sunroof of ancient Rome, letting in light, rain, and a bit of divine ambience. It's said that during certain times of the day, the sunlight streaming through the oculus lights up the interior like a celestial spotlight. Imagine being a Roman citizen, wandering in to pray, or perhaps just to gawk, as the sunbeam illuminates the interior, making everything seem divine. It's like nature's very own light show, long before Pink Floyd figured out how to sync music with lasers. But let's bust a myth while we're here. The Pantheon wasn't just a place for religious ceremonies. While it was indeed a temple to all gods, Peni meaning all, and Theon meaning gods, it was also a venue for political gatherings and public speeches. Hadrian, that clever emperor, saw it as a symbol of Roman unity and power, not just a spiritual sanctuary. It was the architectural equivalent of a modern-day multi-use complex, with less focus on retail space and more on divine real estate. When you think about it, it was a blending of church and state in the most literal sense. Economically, the Pantheon wasn't just a money pit. It was a message to the Roman populace. Look what we can do. The sheer scale and ambition of the project were as much about showcasing Roman engineering prowess as they were about religious reverence. The cost? Well, exact figures are lost to history, but considering the size and complexity, it likely rivaled some of Rome's most expensive undertakings. While we can't put an exact price tag on it, we do know that Hadrian wasn't shy about spending. This was an empire that viewed monumental architecture as the ultimate statement piece, like dropping a Ferrari in the driveway to impress the neighbours. And what about its social impact? The Pantheon was a stage for Rome's societal elite to see and be seen. It was a venue where senators could rub elbows with generals, where the common folk could catch a glimpse of their leaders, and where everyone could appreciate the gods' handiwork, or at least the Romans' best attempt to channel it. It was a symbol of the empire's reach and unity, a place where all roads led not just to Rome, but to a shared cultural and religious experience. Let's not forget the Pantheon's influence on architecture. It's been the muse for countless structures, from St. Peter's Basilica to the US Capitol. Its design has inspired architects for centuries, proving that even without blueprints or CAD software, the Romans knew how to leave a lasting impression. The Pantheon is like that timeless hit song that gets covered by every artist. You can't improve on perfection, but you can sure try to capture a bit of its magic. In the end, the Pantheon isn't just a relic of the past. It's a testament to human ambition, a reminder that with the right mix of vision and volcanic ash, even the most audacious dreams can be cast in stone. It's a place where the divine met the mortal, where the gods of Rome stood shoulder to shoulder with the achievements of humankind. So next time you find yourself marveling at a modern architectural wonder, remember that the Pantheon did it first, and arguably did it best. As we leave the Pantheon behind, our journey through Rome's architectural marvels is far from over. There's still a world of innovation and intrigue to explore, from the urban planning of the ancient city to the technological advancements that allowed Rome to sustain its legendary metropolis. Stay tuned, because the tales of Roman genius are just heating up, and the next chapter promises even more twists and turns than a Roman chariot race. But as we turn the final corner in our Roman architectural tour, it's time to take a step back and look at the big picture, or, in this case, the big blueprint. You see, the Romans didn't just set out to build structures, they were crafting a legacy, one that would ripple through time like a well-thrown pebble in the Tiber. Their architecture was more than stone and mortar. It was the embodiment of Roman ideology, politics, and practical genius. Let's start with the Roman knack for repurposing the wheel of architectural progress. The Romans were the original remix artists, taking Greek and Etruscan influences and adding their own spin, much like your favorite DJ at a music festival. They didn't invent the arch, but they made it the cornerstone of their engineering feats. By mastering the art of the arch, they could build bigger, taller, and more extravagantly than their predecessors. The Colosseum, the aqueducts, the Pantheon, each a testament to what happens when you mix geometry with a dash of Roman audacity. Economics played a massive role in this architectural revolution. Rome wasn't just flexing its muscles for the sake of aesthetics. These constructions were statements of power and wealth. Take the Colosseum, for example. It was as much a financial investment as it was a tool for political control. The construction of these grand edifices often required immense funding, with costs running into millions of sesterces. But in an empire where bread and circuses were the currency of public favour, spending on such spectacles was seen as a necessary expense, much like modern governments pouring billions into hosting the Olympics. The goal was to keep the populace entertained and, crucially, distracted. Politically, these structures were as important as the legions that guarded the empire's borders. They were physical manifestations of Roman authority and ingenuity, meant to awe both citizens and conquered peoples alike. Imagine being a visitor from the far reaches of the empire, stepping into Rome and being confronted by the sheer scale of the Pantheon or the bustling activity around the Forum. It was like a political power suit made of marble and concrete, a reminder that Rome was the center of the world and its emperor, the apex of civilization. Socially, the architecture of Rome was a great leveler, at least in theory. Public baths, forums, and amphitheatres were accessible to all Roman citizens, providing a shared space for leisure and socialization. But let's not kid ourselves, the class divisions were as stark as the marble facades. The best seats in the Colosseum were reserved for the elite, while the common folk rubbed shoulders with the pigeons in the nosebleeds. Aqueducts brought water to the city, but the wealthiest had private pipes running straight into their homes. Roman architecture was as much about showcasing social order as it was about public utility. Now, what would the Romans think of our modern architectural endeavours? Picture an ancient Roman engineer beamed forward in time to see our skyscrapers, bridges, and suburban sprawl. They'd probably be impressed by our ability to reach for the skies, but they might also scratch their heads at some of our choices. After all, the Romans built to last. The Colosseum still stands after nearly 2 millennia, while some modern constructions seem to struggle to make it past the warranty period. Sure, we have technology on our side, but there's something to be said for the Roman commitment to durability. Call it a case of concrete envy. And let's not forget the Romans' penchant for grandiosity, a trait we've certainly inherited. From the Eiffel Tower to the Burj Khalifa, we've taken that Roman desire to touch the heavens and run with it. But unlike the Romans, whose architectural feats were often tied to civic pride and public welfare, some of our modern marvels can feel more like exercises in ego and excess. A Roman visiting a modern city might wonder why we've traded public forums for shopping malls, and why our roads, unlike their meticulously planned counterparts, often seem to lead to gridlock rather than glory. But let's not sell ourselves short. The legacy of Roman architecture can be seen in the very fabric of our cities. The use of concrete, arches, and domes has persisted through the ages, evolving with each new generation of architects. The Romans laid the groundwork, quite literally, for the infrastructure we now take for granted. Our city grids, plumbing systems, and even our penchant for commemorative statues owe a debt to Roman innovation. In reflecting on the legacy of Roman architecture, it's clear that while they may no longer rule the world, their influence is as enduring as the structures they left behind. Rome was built on a foundation of ambition, innovation, and a touch of theatricality, qualities that continue to inspire us today. As we wrap up our journey, let's take a moment to appreciate the Romans for what they were, master builders who understood that architecture was more than just a way to shelter from the elements. It was a way to shape society, to control the narrative, and to leave an indelible mark on history. So next time you stroll through a modern city, spare a thought for the Romans who laid the first stones. Remember that every arch, road, and column is a whisper from the past, telling us that while empires rise and fall, great architecture endures. And isn't that the ultimate legacy? To create something that stands the test of time, inspiring future generations to dream bigger, build bolder, and, just maybe, aim for a little bit of immortality. Rome wasn't built in a day, but its impact will last an eternity. You wake up in the heart of a thriving metropolis, Copan, circa the 9th century. The air is thick with the earthy scent of wet clay and burning incense, a typical morning bouquet in this vibrant Maya city. With a population of about 20,000, Copan is no sleepy village. It's a bustling hub of commerce, politics, and intellectual life. Today, though, there's a certain buzz in the air. It's Mayan Scribes' Day, an occasion that celebrates the unsung heroes of the Maya world, the Scribes. Now, before you get visions of quills and inkwells, let's set the record straight. The Maya scribes were not your average note-takers. These folks were the rock stars of record-keeping, responsible for everything from documenting astronomical phenomena to penning royal decrees. Imagine a blend of Neil deGrasse Tyson and a high-ranking diplomat scribbling away on bark paper codices and stone stelae. They were the keepers of knowledge and wielded their quills like warriors with swords, navigating the complex glyphs that formed the backbone of Maya writing. As you wander through the city, you can see why Copan was a prime location for such intellectual endeavors. It's nestled in the fertile valley of western Honduras, with trade routes stretching for hundreds of miles, connecting it to distant cities. Think of it as a kind of ancient LinkedIn, where goods and ideas flowed freely. Jade, feathers, cacao. These weren't just commodities, but currencies that oiled the gears of this society. The political scene, though, was as complex as a soap opera. The city's rulers, known as the Kahalajor, or Holy Lords, held power through a blend of divine right and strategic alliances. The scribes played a crucial role in this power play, chronicling the achievements and genealogy of the ruling dynasty, ensuring that their legacy was etched in stone, literally. This isn't just history, it's propaganda with a chisel and mallet. As you make your way towards the main plaza, the hub of today's celebrations, it's hard not to be impressed by the towering stelae and altars that dot the landscape. These are the scribes' canvases, where they've immortalized the tales of gods and kings. You might think of them as ancient billboards, broadcasting messages of power and divinity to anyone passing by. The craftsmanship is astounding, each glyph a testament to the scribe's skill and precision. But let's not romanticize too much. The life of a scribe, while prestigious, wasn't all glamour and glory. Sure, they had the ear of the king and access to the inner sanctums of power, but there was a catch. They were bound to the whims of their rulers, their work a tool of statecraft. If the king wanted a victory exaggerated or a defeat downplayed, the scribe complied, or else. In a world where being on the wrong side of history could mean literal head-rolling, you'd choose your words carefully too. The economic backbone of Copan was as diverse as its population. Agriculture thrived in the valley, with maize, beans, and squash being the staples. Beyond that, the trade networks extended the city's influence far and wide, bringing in luxury goods that signaled wealth and status. This was a society where showing off your bling wasn't just for the sake of vanity, it was a strategic display of power. As the sun climbs higher, the plaza fills with the hum of activity. People from all walks of life gather to pay homage to the scribes. Artisans set up stalls, displaying intricate jade carvings and vibrantly painted pottery. Musicians play traditional instruments, their rhythms echoing through the stone corridors. It's a scene of controlled chaos, a testament to the city's thriving cultural life. Yet, for all its vibrancy, the Maya world was not immune to hardship. The 9th century marked the beginning of a tumultuous period, often referred to as the Maya collapse. Environmental pressures, overpopulation, and political strife were the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. But, for now, those troubles seem distant. Today, the focus is on celebrating the scribes and their indispensable role in preserving the culture and history of this remarkable civilization. So, here you are, in the thick of it all, surrounded by the living tapestry of Maya life. As the celebration of Scribes' Day unfolds, you can't help but feel a sense of awe at the complexity and sophistication of this ancient society. The scribes, with their ink-stained fingers and keen intellects, are the silent architects of this legacy, and in this moment, amidst the noise and colour, you become a part of their story. Can you hear the whispers of history? They're calling, etched in stone, waiting for you to listen. The whispers of history echo in your ears as you navigate through the vibrant chaos of Copan's main plaza. It's a sensory overload. Think Times Square but with more feathers and fewer flashing billboards. Today, your journey takes you to the fabled hieroglyphic stairway, a staggering 63-step monument that's basically the Maya version of an epic saga carved in stone. This stairway isn't just a flight of steps, it's the longest known text in the entire Maya world. Imagine Shakespeare writing War and Peace on a skyscraper and you're getting close. Now, before you start thinking that these scribes were just chiseling away for fun, let's set the record straight. Each glyph on this stairway is a masterpiece of linguistic and artistic genius, recounting the illustrious history of Copan's rulers. An ancient power move, if there ever was one. The scribes had the daunting task of not only chronicling events, but also shaping them to favour the ruling elite. If the king wanted his losses turned into strategic retreats, the scribe made it happen. In a realm where your job security was as fragile as a clay pot, creativity was a survival skill. Speaking of survival, let's talk tools of the trade. Forget laptops and legal pads. Welcome to the world of bark paper codices and stone stelae. These were the media through which scribes exercised their craft. The codices, made from the inner bark of fig trees, were lightweight, portable, and could be rolled up and tucked under an arm like an ancient scroll. On the other hand, stone stelae were the heavyweight champions of permanence. Think of them as the hard drives of history, immune to firewalls but not to erosion. But here's the kicker, the tools weren't cheap. Take the brushes, for instance. A well-crafted brush could set you back 10 cacao beans. Quite the price tag when you consider that cacao beans were the currency of the day. That's like dropping $10 on a pen every time you ran out of ink. These brushes, made from animal hair, were the scribe's lifeline. Without them, recording the whims of the court or the phases of Venus was simply not happening. Let's not forget the ink, a concoction of plant dyes, minerals, and sometimes even the occasional insect. Yep, you heard that right. Picture this, a scribe grinding up cochineal bugs to get that perfect shade of red. It's a reminder that behind every elegant glyph was a less than elegant process. Talk about dedication to your craft, or maybe just a desperate need to keep the boss happy. The myth of the scribe as a mere record keeper is as misleading as thinking reality TV is unscripted. In truth, these scribes were the unsung spin doctors of their day. They advised kings, shaped political narratives, and even determined how future generations would view the present. It's a bit like controlling the script of a long-running soap opera, where the stakes are real and the actors wield spears instead of scripts. You see, in the hierarchy of Maya society, scribes were more than just literate, they were literati. They sat at the right hand of kings, whispering into ears that could decide the fate of cities. In a world where history was literally carved in stone, their influence was immense. They could elevate a king to godhood, or, with the stroke of a brush, consign him to oblivion. Imagine having that kind of power while still being beholden to the whims of a temperamental ruler. It's the ultimate office politics, with a side of existential dread. And yet, for all their influence, scribes lived in a constant state of duality. They were revered for their wisdom, yet their survival depended on the very rulers they helped to glorify. It's a bit like being the lead actor in a blockbuster while knowing the director could replace you on a whim. The romantic image of the scribe as an all-powerful intellectual is tempered by the harsh reality of their precarious existence. As you stand before the hieroglyphic stairway, the weight of its history looms large. Each step is a chapter in the epic tale of Copan, a testament to the scribe's skill and the city's grandeur. But beneath the surface lies a complex web of power, politics, and art, an intricate dance that ensured the Maya legacy would endure. The scribes, with their ink-stained hands and sharp minds, were the architects of this narrative, crafting tales that would echo through the ages. So, as you ponder the glyphs carved into the stone, remember that these aren't just stories of gods and kings. They're the whispers of a civilization that understood the power of narrative long before the digital age. And while the world of the Maya may have vanished, their legacy lingers, etched in the stairway, waiting for those curious enough to listen. The day stretches ahead, and with it the promise of more secrets to uncover. Stay tuned, because the past isn't done talking just yet. As you ponder these ancient glyphs, the whispers of history start to fade as the sun climbs higher. It's time to move from the stoic stone of the hieroglyphic stairway to the animated debates of the royal court. Here, the scribes gather not just to celebrate, but to engage in one of their more celestial duties, predicting astronomical events. And let me tell you, in the Maya world, knowing when the next eclipse would occur wasn't just a party trick, it was a matter of cosmic importance. You see, the Maya weren't just stargazers lounging on their pyramids with nothing better to do. Their entire civilization was built on a cosmic balance that linked the heavens and earth in a tightly woven tapestry. A misstep in predicting a celestial event like an eclipse didn't just mean you missed the headline news, it could mean the gods were displeased and the king might just shoot the messenger, literally. Imagine being fired for missing a deadline, but instead of a terse email from HR, it's a direct order from the Kuhula jaw, and fired involves actual fire. On this particular day, the scribes are huddled together in the court, which is abuzz with anticipation. They've got their codices spread out, filled with intricate calculations and observations that would make any modern astronomer nod in respect. This isn't guesswork, it's centuries of data, meticulously recorded and analyzed. The Maya tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with a precision that would eventually rival the best European observatories. They even had their own version of a leap year, adjusting their calendar to keep it in sync with the solar year. Let's get one thing straight. The romantic notion of the Maya as mystical seers is as appealing as it is misleading. Their predictive prowess wasn't due to some divine intervention or secret knowledge bequeathed by extraterrestrial visitors. Nope, it was good old-fashioned science. They observed the sky tirelessly, noting every little change and pattern, kind of like binge-watching your favorite show and predicting plot twists based on past episodes, except their stakes were a bit higher. Imagine the scene, a semicircle of scribes, each with a reputation as sharp as their quills, debating the implications of the next lunar eclipse. Will it signal a bountiful harvest or a disastrous war? The air is thick with the excitement of intellectual sparring, each scribe vying to demonstrate their mastery of celestial mechanics. It's a bit like an academic conference, just without the PowerPoints and with a lot more feathers and jade. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Maya believed that celestial events were not just random occurrences, but messages from the gods. Eclipses, in particular, were seen as moments when the natural order was disrupted. The sun and moon, normally so reliable, would suddenly be out of sync, plunging the world into temporary chaos. For a society that valued order and balance, this was the ultimate test of faith and knowledge. Predicting these events accurately could elevate a scribe's status from mere record-keeper to a revered sage. But get it wrong, and you could find yourself out of favour faster than you can say Quetzalcoatl. And in a world where your next meal might depend on the king's goodwill, that's not a risk you'd want to take lightly. It's a high-stakes game of cosmic roulette, and the scribes are the ones placing the bets. Now, let's talk economics, because, let's face it, everything always comes down to money, or in this case, cacao beans. The resources allocated to the scribes for their work were significant. Observatories were constructed, not just for show, but as essential tools for astronomical observation. The labour and materials for these structures were costly. Imagine shelling out a significant chunk of the royal treasury for the ancient equivalent of a NASA lab. But the return on investment was clear. A successful prediction could avert disaster or secure a harvest, ensuring the prosperity of the city and the continued support of the populace. The politics of astronomy in Maya culture were as complex as a celestial navigation chart. The scribes had to be diplomats, scientists, and theologians rolled into one. They had to navigate the treacherous waters of court intrigue, ensuring their predictions aligned with the political desires of the ruling elite. If the king needed a sign from the gods to justify a new war or alliance, well, the stars might just happen to corroborate his plans, purely coincidental, of course. But let's not kid ourselves. For all their sophistication, the Maya were still human. Their predictions, while impressive, weren't infallible. There were times when the skies defied even the best of calculations, and the consequences could be dire. It's a reminder that even the most advanced societies have their limits. The myth of infallible divine foresight crumbles when faced with the harsh reality of human error. And for the scribes, this was a truth they lived with every day. So, as you stand in the court, watching the intellectual dance unfold, remember that these scribes were not merely chroniclers of the past, but architects of the future. Their work shaped the destiny of Copan and, by extension, the Maya world. They balanced on a knife edge of knowledge and power, ever aware that the next calculation could tip the scales in their favour or send them tumbling into obscurity. The day presses on, the sun casting long shadows across the court, but the discussions continue. The scribes locked in a battle of wits and wisdom, their eyes on the heavens and their feet firmly on the ground. And as the horizon begins to glow with the hues of impending dusk, you can't help but feel a sense of awe at the spectacle unfolding before you. The past is alive, etched in the minds of those who dare to decode its mysteries. Stay tuned, because the celestial dance is far from over, and there are still stars to chart and stories to tell. As the vibrant dusk settles over Copan, the court's buzz gives way to a quieter, more introspective atmosphere. You wander through the maze of workshops where the scribe's artistic prowess comes alive. Here, the smell of wet clay mingles with the tang of mineral pigments, and you can almost hear the gentle scratch of styluses against plaster. The scribe's afternoon isn't about idle doodles or graffiti. It's a masterclass in art and politics. These scribes were more than just recorders of history. They were its illustrators, wielding tools that shaped perceptions as easily as they did stone and stucco. Imagine the Maya equivalent of a Renaissance artist, but with the added pressure of pleasing not just wealthy patrons, but divine kings with a penchant for beautiful propaganda. Let's start with the glyphs. These weren't just fancy squiggles, they were the Instagram posts of their day, conveying complex messages in a single, elegant image. Each glyph was a mini-masterpiece requiring precision and artistic flair. The scribes drew these symbols on everything from codices to colossal stone monuments, each stroke carefully considered. Creating a glyph wasn't just about aesthetics, It was a dance between form and function where every curve and line had meaning. The scribes' artistry wasn't limited to writing. They painted vibrant murals that covered palace walls, depicting mythological scenes and royal exploits. Picture a grand hall, its walls a riot of colour, reds, blues, greens, each hue painstakingly extracted from natural sources. Cinnabar for red, perhaps mixed with a little bit of hematite for that perfect shade. These murals weren't just decorative, they were narratives, sprawling tales that glorified the kings and reinforced the social order. And here's a fun tidbit, these murals were also a bit of a social media feed. They chronicled the latest royal victories, divine endorsements, and of course, the occasional scandal. Your ruler just snagged a new alliance with a neighbouring city-state? That's going up on the wall faster than you can say glyph. This was art with a purpose, to inspire, to manipulate, and sometimes to intimidate. But let's not forget who called the shots. While scribes had the talent, the subject matter wasn't exactly up to them. The elite dictated what stories got told and how. The murals and glyphs were tools of propaganda designed to reinforce the ruler's divine right to govern. If the king wanted to be depicted as the reincarnation of a god, you bet he'd get it. The scribe's job was to make it look as divine as possible, and woe betide anyone who failed to capture the king's best side. Despite their artistic genius, scribes rarely escaped the shadow of the elite. They were the middle managers of the Maya world, indispensable yet always under the thumb of those in power. Imagine being the creative director of a blockbuster film, with the studio breathing down your neck to make sure the lead actor looks heroic. The scribe's creativity was bound by the politics of the day, their art a reflection of the social hierarchy they could never quite climb. Now, let's talk economics because, after all, creating these masterpieces didn't come cheap. Pigments were sourced from far and wide, crushed shells, rare minerals, and even the odd insect. This wasn't just a stroll down to the local craft store. These materials were expensive, and procuring them involved extensive trade networks stretching from the Yucatan to the highlands of Guatemala. It's like running a small business, with a supply chain as complicated as it is crucial. And the cost wasn't just in materials. The time spent on a single mural or stela could be immense. A major project might keep a team of scribes busy for weeks, if not months. Imagine the pressure of working on a royal commission, knowing that every stroke would be scrutinized by the king and his court. The stakes were high, and failure wasn't an option. After all, in a world where your art could literally be carved in stone, there was no room for second drafts. In this intricate dance of art and politics, the scribes were the unsung heroes. They held the brushes and chisels that crafted not just images, but legacies. They shaped how future generations would view their rulers and their gods, wielding their artistic skills with the precision of a surgeon. Yet, for all their influence, they remained servants to the whims of the elite. A reminder that even the most gifted artists often live in the shadow of those who hold the reins of power. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, you can't help but marvel at the scribes' enduring legacy. Their art was not just a reflection of their time, but a tool that shaped it, carving stories into the very fabric of Maya society. The past speaks through their work, a testament to their skill and the complex world they navigated. And as you linger in the twilight, the echoes of their craft whisper through the ages, a reminder that even the most silent voices can leave a lasting mark. Stay tuned, because the story of the scribes is far from over, and there are still many layers of history left to uncover. As the twilight deepens, the legacy of the Maya scribes beckons you to pause and reflect. Sure, there's a certain allure to the idea of a lost civilization, like Atlantis, but with more jaguars and less water. But the reality is grimmer, and it involves more than just a few misplaced codices. When the Spanish conquistadors rolled into town in the 16th century, they weren't just after gold and glory. They had a particular disdain for anything that didn't fit their worldview, including the intricate glyphs of the Maya scribes. Imagine the heartbreak of seeing your life's work go up in flames because someone thought it was pagan mumbo-jumbo. Let's get specific. Diego de Landa, a Spanish bishop with a penchant for cultural cleansing, was responsible for burning countless Maya texts, reducing centuries of accumulated knowledge to ash. In 1562, in Mani, Yucatan, he ordered a mass burning of Maya manuscripts, an act he saw as purifying, but which history remembers as a tragic erasure. We're talking about the loss of potentially thousands of books, each a treasure trove of astronomical observations, historical records, and religious texts. Think of it as wiping out the entire Library of Congress because you didn't like the font. But here's where the story takes a turn for the hopeful. Not all was lost. A handful of codices survived this cultural apocalypse, whisked away or hidden by those who understood their true value. Today, only 4 confirmed Maya codices are known to exist: the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier codices. These texts are like the last 4 surviving episodes of a long-lost epic series, offering tantalizing glimpses into a civilization that was far from primitive. The Dresden Codex, for example, is a 74-page almanac of astronomical tables so precise that it predicted solar eclipses centuries ahead of its time. Take that, Nostradamus. These surviving texts continue to shape our understanding of the Maya, revealing a society that was as sophisticated as it was enigmatic. They challenged the stereotype of the Maya as mere bloodthirsty temple builders with a penchant for human sacrifice. Instead, they reveal a people who were mathematicians, astronomers, and philosophers, crafting elaborate calendars and mapping the stars with a precision few Europeans could match at the time. Talk about a plot twist. And while the romantic image of the Maya as a mysterious, vanished civilization is tempting, it's important to acknowledge the reality of their endurance. The Maya people didn't just disappear like some historical magic trick. Descendants of the ancient Maya still inhabit parts of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras, keeping cultural traditions alive in a world that often forgets its roots. Their languages, customs, and, yes, even some of their ancient stories persist, like echoes of a song that refuses to fade. Economically, the legacy of the scribes is woven into the fabric of the societies that followed. The scribes' meticulous records of agricultural cycles remain useful, influencing farming practices even today. The economic structures they documented provide insight into trade networks that were as complex as any modern supply chain. Jade, obsidian, cacao. These weren't just goods, they were symbols of status and power, a testament to the economic dynamism of the Maya world. Politically, the scribes' work serves as a cautionary tale about the power of narrative. They crafted stories that cemented the divine right of kings, shaped public perception, and, in some cases, rewrote history to suit the ruling elite. It's a reminder that history is often written by the victors, or at least those with the chisel in hand. In today's world of fake news and alternative facts, the scribe's legacy stands as a stark reminder of the power and danger of controlling the narrative. Let's not forget the human element, the scribes themselves. They were the unsung heroes, the intellectual giants who operated in the shadows of kings and gods. Their legacy is one of resilience and ingenuity, a testament to the power of the pen, or in this case the stylus, to shape history. They remind us that even in a world dominated by the sword, the written word endures, whispering truths long after the last blade has rusted away. As the stars emerge over Copan, twinkling like 1,000 ancient eyes, you can't help but marvel at the scribes' enduring influence. Their legacy is not just etched in stone, but in the very fabric of our understanding of history. They were the architects of a narrative that has survived invasions, colonization, and the slow decay of time. And while their works may have been scattered and burned, their influence continues to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of knowledge. So, as we wrap up our journey through the vibrant world of the Maya scribes, let's carry forward their legacy, not just as a distant memory, but as a living testament to the power of human creativity and resilience. In a world where history so often repeats itself, the scribes remind us to listen to the whispers of the past, to question the narratives we are told, and to seek the truths hidden within the glyphs of our own time. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the stories we tell, and those we choose to preserve, shape the world we live in. In the rolling steppes of the 13th century, where the winds seemed to whisper secrets of conquest yet to come, a boy named Subutai was born into a world that would soon learn to tremble at the mention of his name. Now, if you're expecting some mystical prophecy or celestial sign marking his arrival, lower those romantic expectations. Subutai's entry into the annals of history wasn't heralded by comets or celestial fireworks. Nope, Just another day in the life of a nomadic tribe, a reality as raw and rugged as the landscape itself. Subutai, whose full name was actually Subutai Ba'atur, emerged from humble beginnings, humble even by the standards of Mongol herders. He was born into the Uriankai tribe, a group that history doesn't exactly spotlight unless you're a whiz at Mongol genealogy. But what he lacked in pedigree, Subutai made up for with a mind that was as sharp as a Mongol arrowhead. And in a world where your survival often depended on how fast you could figure out how not to starve or get skewered, brains were a pretty good asset. By the time Subutai was of age to hold a bow, the Mongol Empire was already on a meteoric rise under the leadership of Genghis Khan, a man who had a knack for turning the impossible into a regular Tuesday. The socio-political landscape of the era was as complex as it was brutal. Imagine a world where power shifted not through diplomatic handshakes, but by whose cavalry could flatten your village the quickest. And that was where Subutai found his calling. Genghis Khan, a man who knew a good strategist when he saw one, soon noticed the young Subutai. It didn't hurt that Subutai's brother Jelmi was already a trusted general in Genghis's army. Talk about networking before LinkedIn made it cool. Subutai's rise was swift, not unlike a hawk spotting its prey, and soon he became one of Genghis Khan's most trusted generals. Legend has it that Genghis himself marveled at Subutai's ability to think several moves ahead, like a chess grandmaster in a world that hadn't quite figured out chess yet. Subutai's military genius lay not just in brute force, but in the clever, sometimes downright sneaky tactics he employed. Picture this. You're a medieval European army, fancy armor and all, marching to face what you think is a beaten Mongol force. Surprise. That retreating Mongol army is actually leading you into an ambush where you'll be outflanked by Subutai's hidden divisions. It was psychological warfare served with a side of tactical brilliance, a method that would become Subutai's calling card. But don't get too swept up in the romance of it all. The reality of Mongol warfare was anything but glamorous. Forget the Hollywood scenes of noble one-on-one combat. This was about as pretty as a mud wrestling match. Subutai's strategies often involved things like cutting off enemy supplies and using feigned retreats to lure opponents into traps. Practical? Absolutely. Glamorous? Not in the slightest. The Mongols were known for their speed and mobility, often covering over 100 miles in a day, which was practically unheard of at the time. Their ability to live off the land, supplemented by an impressive logistics network, think of it as Amazon Prime, but for horses and arrows, allowed them to outmaneuver and outlast their opponents. As much as we'd like to imagine Subutai as a lone genius, his success was also a product of the Mongol war machine, a complex system that included everything from detailed intelligence networks to a relay system that kept communication flowing faster than a medieval gossip mill. This wasn't just a horde of wild horsemen. It was a highly organized force that could deploy with precision and adapt to any environment. Subutai's early exploits were a testament to this blend of cunning and organization. He was instrumental in the Mongol campaigns against the Jin dynasty in northern China, where his tactics helped deliver critical victories. His penchant for using surprise and deception would later be honed in the vast expanses of the Russian steppes and the battlefields of Eastern Europe, but that's a tale for another night. In the grand tapestry of history, Subutai's rise is a stark reminder that genius often grows from the unlikeliest of places. He was not the product of noble birth or divine right, but of a world where adaptability and ingenuity were the keys to survival. The Mongol Empire, under Genghis Khan and his successors, was a place that rewarded talent no matter where it came from, and Subutai was living proof of that ethos. So next time you find yourself pondering the romanticized image of the Mongol warrior, remember Subutai, the mastermind who turned the art of war into a game of wits, where the laughs were often at the expense of those who underestimated him. And as he would likely remind us, underestimating a Mongol was the quickest way to an early and not very poetic demise. Now, let's dive into the whirlwind of Subutai's campaigns across Eurasia, an epic saga that makes your average road trip look like a Sunday drive. Imagine a medieval GPS plotting a route that spans thousands of miles, from the frigid Siberian steppes to the heart of Hungary. Subutai, the maestro of Mongol maneuvering, orchestrated a series of campaigns that were nothing short of logistical feats. Let's talk numbers, because if there's one thing that doesn't lie, it's cold, hard data. Subutai commanded upwards of 20,000 to 30,000 troops, an intimidating force by any standard, especially considering these weren't just foot soldiers plodding along, but highly mobile cavalry units. The Mongols could cover up to 75 miles a day, a speed that even modern armies might envy. Just picture galloping across vast expanses with nothing but the horizon as your guide and the occasional enemy army to spice things up. Economically speaking, maintaining such a mobile force was akin to running a medieval version of Uber Eats, only replace the food delivery with arrows and battle tactics. The Mongol logistics network was legendary, reliant on a well-oiled system of supply depots and relay stations known as YAM, which made sure messages and orders travelled faster than your average conspiracy theory. The cost of this operation? Astronomical, but Genghis Khan's empire had a knack for turning conquered lands into revenue streams. Think of it as hostile takeovers, but with actual hostilities. Subutai's campaigns were not just about expanding borders, but also about strategic disruption. Take the infamous 1237-1240 invasion of Russes, for instance. This wasn't just a military conquest, it was a demonstration of Mongol might that left a permanent mark on Eastern Europe. Cities like Ryazan and Kiev were razed, their golden domes reduced to ash, a harsh reminder that the Mongols weren't just there to collect postcards. The economic fallout was significant. Local economies were decimated, and the power dynamics of the region were irreversibly altered. For the Mongols, this meant potential new tributaries and resources to fuel further conquests. But let's not romanticize the chaos. For those on the receiving end, it was apocalyptic. Pop culture loves to paint the Mongols as a marauding horde, a sort of medieval Mad Max scenario. But the truth is, Subutai's operations were meticulously planned and executed with the precision of a Swiss watch. His campaigns in Eastern Europe were a masterclass in multi-front warfare, where he employed feigned retreats, double envelopments, and psychological warfare that would make any modern military strategist sit up and take notes. Now, let's address the myths. Subutai is often depicted as a lone genius, but the reality is his success was a collective effort. He had a cadre of capable generals and an intelligence network that kept him informed about enemy movements, terrain, and local politics. Information that was as valuable as gold. And while he's credited with numerous victories, it's crucial to remember that the Mongol war machine was a collaborative enterprise, one where Subutai's brilliance was most certainly a highlight, but not the only one. Primary sources from the era, like the Persian historian Juvaini, offer a glimpse into the awe and fear that Subutai inspired. But these accounts should be taken with a grain of salt, as they often come with a side of embellishment. Was Subutai a mythical warrior with near-supernatural abilities, or was he a strategic savant who understood the art of war better than his contemporaries? Probably a bit of both. But let's not forget the countless nameless warriors and strategists who played pivotal roles in these grand campaigns. The romantic notion of a singular genius leading unstoppable hordes is tempting, but the truth is far grittier and more human. It was about leveraging every advantage, from the terrain to the psychological state of opponents, and doing so with a ruthlessness that left no room for error. Subutai's campaigns are a testament to the power of strategy and adaptability, a lesson that, while it may not fit neatly into a Hollywood script, underscores the complex tapestry of history. As we continue this journey through Subutai's exploits, remember that each conquest was a chapter in a larger narrative, a narrative that was as much about survival and ingenuity as it was about domination. The Mongol Empire, with its vast networks and strategic brilliance, reshaped the world in ways that still echo today. And while Subutai may have been one of its brightest stars, his story is a reminder that history is rarely the tale of one man, but a symphony of many voices, each contributing to the cacophony of human endeavor. Now, as we delve further into the Mongol saga, let's take a peek behind the curtain of medieval geopolitics, the Game of Thrones that was Subutai's playground. Picture the Mongol Empire not as a monolith of chaos, but as a well-oiled machine running on alliances and betrayals, like a medieval soap opera with fewer love triangles and more siege engines. Subutai was a maestro in this political symphony, crafting alliances with the same finesse as he orchestrated ambushes. The Mongol strategy wasn't just about smashing through front lines, it was about weaving a complex web of allegiances and rivalries. Take, for instance, the Mongols' alliance with the Song dynasty against the Jin dynasty. In this medieval power play, Subutai and his comrades leveraged the Song's resources and manpower while gradually tightening the noose around the Jin like a python with a particularly expensive taste. But let's not sugarcoat the betrayals. Subutai wasn't above double-crossing a few allies when it suited his and the empire's interests. The political landscape was a treacherous one, where today's friend could be tomorrow's conquest. It was less about honor and more about who could offer the most strategic advantage. The Mongols were the ultimate opportunists, and Subutai was their shrewd architect, understanding that sometimes you had to burn a few bridges to light your path forward. Now, as the Mongol Empire expanded like a teenager's appetite at an all-you-can-eat buffet, managing the newly conquered territories became a logistical nightmare worthy of its own reality show. Genghis Khan and his successors weren't just about conquering, they were about administrating their vast dominion with the efficiency of a corporate takeover. Here's where Subutai's campaigns played a pivotal role, as these weren't just about military victories, but about integrating diverse cultures and economies into the Mongol fold. The Mongols established an administrative system that would make any modern bureaucrat weep with envy. They used a combination of local governance and Mongol oversight, a sort of medieval version of, you can keep your culture, but pay us taxes. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, was a real thing, albeit enforced with a heavy hand. This peace facilitated trade and communication across Eurasia, effectively creating a medieval Silk Road 2.0. Subutai's adaptability was legendary, not just in terms of tactics but in traversing challenging terrains and climates. Imagine leading an army from the frigid steppes of Siberia to the humid plains of Southeast Asia. It was like conducting a global tour without the benefit of modern conveniences like GPS or even a decent weather app. Logistics were a nightmare. Think medieval FedEx, but instead of packages, you're delivering troops, horses, and arrows. But Subutai managed it, using an intricate network of scouts and spies to navigate and gather intel. The Mongol army was a mobile fortress, able to pack up and move hundreds of miles at the drop of a hat. They had a saying, "The strength of a wall is neither greater nor less than the courage of those who defend it." And Subutai was all about proving that walls and weather were mere inconveniences when you had a strategy and a bit of Mongol grit. But let's address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the horse in the yurt, the romanticized narrative of Mongol invincibility. Sure, they were fearsome, but they weren't invincible. Subutai's campaigns faced real-world challenges that even his strategic brilliance couldn't completely overcome. For instance, the Mongols' failed invasion of Japan in 1274 and 1281, foiled by none other than the kamikaze, or divine wind, as typhoons decimated their fleets. Mother Nature, it seems, was the one foe Subutai couldn't outmaneuver. And it wasn't just the elements. The logistical strain of maintaining an empire that spanned continents was immense. The Mongols had to contend with everything from supply shortages to rebellious vassals. Subutai's genius lay in his ability to adapt and improvise, turning setbacks into opportunities. But even he couldn't change the fact that sometimes the biggest adversary was the sheer scale of the empire itself. So, while the myth of Mongol invincibility is tempting, the truth is far more nuanced. It was a tale of relentless ambition, strategic ingenuity, and the harsh realities of medieval warfare. Subutai's story is a reminder that history is written in shades of grey, where legends are born not just from triumphs, but from the struggles that accompany them. As we continue to unravel the complexities of Subutai's campaigns, keep in mind that this was a world where the line between ally and enemy was as thin as a Mongol bowstring, and where the greatest victories often came at an even greater cost. The Mongol Empire wasn't just about expanding borders. It was about maintaining a delicate balance of power, economics, and human nature. A balance that Subutai mastered with a skill that still echoes across the annals of history. Stay tuned for more tales from the steppes, where every conquest was a chapter in a saga that redefined the world map and left an indelible mark on history. Just as the Mongol Empire was a colossal web of conquest and administration, the life of Subutai in his later years was a tapestry woven with threads of both glory and the inevitable march of time. By the time the 1240s rolled around, Subutai had orchestrated enough victories to fill a Viking saga, yet even the most celebrated generals aren't immune to the mundane realities of aging. The man who once made entire nations tremble was now beginning to feel the creaks in his bones. But let's not picture him as some grizzled old warrior reluctantly shuffling off the stage. Subutai, ever the strategist, was still very much in the game, albeit from a different angle. Subutai's influence on military tactics was like that of a rock star whose riffs are emulated long after the band has left the stage. His strategies laid the groundwork for future warfare, much like a blueprint for modern military tactics. Take, for example, his use of the feigned retreat, a move that would make even the most seasoned poker player nod in appreciation. This tactic wasn't just about pulling back, it was about luring the enemy into a false sense of security before launching a devastating counterattack. It's a strategy that echoes through the ages, influencing commanders from Napoleon to Rommel. Now, that's a legacy that doesn't just gather dust on a shelf. But the Mongol Empire wasn't static, even as Subutai's role evolved. Under the rule of Genghis Khan's successors, such as his grandson Kublai Khan, the empire was shifting gears from rapid expansion to consolidation and governance. This meant that military campaigns were increasingly about maintaining control rather than acquiring new lands. Subutai, with decades of battlefield experience, was the perfect mentor for the next generation of Mongol leaders. He wasn't just a relic of past glories, he was an active participant in shaping the political and military landscape of the Mongol Empire. Speaking of political landscapes, the Mongol Empire in Subutai's later years was like a medieval version of a juggling act, with more balls in the air than a circus performer on a caffeine high. The empire stretched from Eastern Europe to the Korean peninsula, and managing such a vast dominion required more than just brute force. Subutai's campaigns had shown that gathering intelligence and forming strategic alliances were just as important as winning battles. The emphasis on intelligence networks and political maneuvering became central to Mongol governance, a legacy that Subutai had helped to build. However, let's not fall into the trap of romanticizing Subutai as a flawless mastermind. While his legendary status was well earned, he was also a man who dealt with the same existential dilemmas as any other aging warrior. The myths often gloss over the fact that even the greatest generals have to contend with the passage of time, changing political climates, and the next generation itching to make their mark. Subutai's later years were a balancing act between maintaining his influence and adapting to a world that was rapidly changing, even by Mongol standards. The social changes within the empire were as significant as the political ones. The Mongols, once seen as barbaric conquerors, were becoming administrators and patrons of culture. The Mongol Peace, or Pax Mongolica, facilitated trade and cultural exchange across the empire, turning it into a melting pot of ideas, religions, and goods. Subutai's campaigns had opened the doors to this new world, albeit with the subtlety of a battering ram. But let's not forget, this cultural exchange wasn't just about sharing recipes for kumis. It was about creating a new socio-economic order, one that would reverberate through the centuries. Subutai's legacy in these later years was not just about the battles he fought, but also the strategies and policies he inspired. His emphasis on mobility, intelligence, and adaptability was a playbook for future military leaders. The Mongols' ability to adapt to different terrains and climates, from the Siberian tundras to the deserts of Persia, was a testament to this strategic mindset. It's no exaggeration to say that Subutai's influence can be seen in modern warfare, where flexibility and intelligence are often the keys to victory. Now, let's take a moment to address the myths surrounding Subutai. While the romantic image of a lone Mongol warrior conquering the world is tempting, the truth is far more nuanced. Subutai was part of a well-oiled military machine, one that combined individual brilliance with collective effort. Primary sources like The Secret History of the Mongols and accounts from Persian historians offer insights into his character and methods, but they also require a discerning eye. Was Subutai a near-mythical figure, or a man who simply understood the art of war better than most? Probably a bit of both, but let's not forget the countless unnamed soldiers and commanders who played crucial roles in his campaigns. In the end, Subutai's story is a reminder that history is a tapestry of complexities, where legends are born from both triumphs and trials. His later years were not a simple fade into obscurity, but a continuation of a life spent in pursuit of strategic brilliance. He may not have had the vigor of youth, but his mind was as sharp as ever, influencing the Mongol Empire and shaping the future of warfare. As we move towards the final chapter of Subutai's life, remember that his legacy is not just in the battles he won, but in the strategies and lessons he left behind, a testament to a life well fought and a mind well used. As Subutai's twilight years unfolded, his legacy was already cementing itself in the annals of military history, much like a rock star whose albums go platinum long after the farewell tour. Now, let's not get too misty-eyed. This isn't some Hollywood montage where the hero rides into the sunset. Subutai's influence was more like the ripples from a stone cast into a lake, expanding far beyond the initial splash, affecting not just his immediate successors but military thinkers for generations. You see, Subutai wasn't just some relic of Mongol glory, he was a blueprint for modern warfare. Fast forward to the present day, and you'll find his tactics dissected in military academies across the globe. His famous use of the feigned retreat, a tactical maneuver that would make Sun Tzu nod in approval, is still taught as a textbook example of psychological warfare. It's the kind of strategy that turns the battlefield into a chessboard where the pieces are real and the stakes are life and death. And let's talk about his logistical genius. Subutai could move armies across continents with a speed that would make a modern supply chain manager green with envy. His mastery of supply lines and communication networks, reminiscent of a medieval FedEx, ensured that his forces were always a step or 100 miles ahead of their enemies. This wasn't just about moving troops, it was about maintaining an empire's edge in a world where delays could mean disaster. Now, before we get too carried away with the accolades, let's pop the bubble of myth just a bit. Subutai is often depicted as a solitary genius, a lone wolf masterminding campaigns from his tent. But the truth is, he was part of a collaborative effort, a cog in the well-oiled Mongol war machine. His success was as much about the collective strength of the Mongol forces as it was about his individual brilliance. The myth of the lone genius is tempting, but reality paints a picture of teamwork and shared objectives. Yet, the allure of Subutai's legend is hard to resist. The idea of a single figure bending the world to his will is a narrative we can't seem to shake, whether we're talking ancient warriors or modern tech moguls. The truth, however, is that even the greatest minds stand on the shoulders of their peers and predecessors, weaving their contributions into the larger tapestry of history. In the grand scheme of things, Subutai's impact wasn't confined to the Mongol Empire. His strategic innovations echoed across Europe and Asia, influencing military thought in ways that would shape centuries of conflict. From the blitzkrieg tactics of World War II to modern-day military doctrines, the principles he honed on the steppes continue to resonate, the notion of speed, surprise, and adaptability. Core tenets of Subutai's approach are as relevant today as they were when his horsemen thundered across the plains. But let's not overlook the economic backdrop of his era. The Mongol conquests, while brutal, also paved the way for unprecedented levels of trade and cultural exchange. The Silk Road, under the Pax Mongolica, became a bustling artery of commerce, a medieval precursor to globalization. Subutai's campaigns helped secure this network, facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West. It was less about conquering for plunder and more about creating a sustainable system of tribute and trade. However, the romanticized vision of a seamless Pax Mongolica glosses over the harsh realities. The Mongols' brand of peace came at a hefty price, often enforced with an iron grip. The empire's vast network of tribute states wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about power dynamics, where allegiance was often coerced through a mix of fear and pragmatic alliance. The economic benefits were undeniable, but they came wrapped in the same package as subjugation and upheaval. In unpacking Subutai's legacy, we confront the perennial dance between myth and reality. The histories that paint him as a near-mythical figure often skip the gritty details, the logistical nightmares, the political machinations, the human cost of conquest. Yet, it's precisely these details that make his story compelling. They remind us that history is not a series of singular acts of brilliance, but a complex web of human endeavour fraught with contradictions and compromises. As we wrap up this journey through Subutai's life, let's pause to appreciate the intricate interplay of myth and fact. The stories we tell about figures like Subutai reveal as much about our own desires and fears as they do about the past. We yearn for heroes who embody our ideals, yet the reality is often more nuanced. In acknowledging both the legend and the man, we gain a richer understanding of the forces that shaped an era and continue to shape our world today. Subutai's legacy, like all of history's great figures, is a tapestry, a blend of triumph and tribulation, myth and reality. In studying his life, we're reminded that the past is not a distant land but a mirror reflecting the complexities of the human experience. So, here's to Subutai, the architect of Mongol might, the strategist whose lessons endure, and the man whose story invites us to explore the rich, contradictory narrative of history itself. Karl Marx entered the world on May 5, 1818 in Trier, Germany, a town that, at the time, wasn't exactly a hotbed of revolutionary thought. It was more like a laid-back little corner of the Prussian Rhineland, where the most scandalous thing you'd find was probably someone drinking their wine a tad too early in the day. Marx's family wasn't the aristocracy, but they also weren't scraping by. His father, Heinrich Marx, was a lawyer, a job that sounds about as exciting as watching paint dry, but it paid the bills and kept the Marx family comfortably middle class. Heinrich had converted from Judaism to Lutheranism, a move that was more about fitting in with the social norms of the time than any sudden religious revelation. Now, Karl was the third of 9 children. Yes, 9. It's like his parents were running their own mini-population experiment. Growing up in this bustling household, Marx wasn't exactly starved for company or arguments. He developed a knack for debate early on, which, funnily enough, would become a hallmark of his later years. As a kid, Marx was known for his wit and intelligence, traits that were as evident as his unruly mop of hair. By the time Karl was ready for higher education, he was sent off to the University of Bonn. This was in 1835, when he was just 17 years old, and like many teenage boys away from home for the first time, he might have enjoyed the social aspects of university life a bit too much. He joined a drinking society and even got into a duel, because why not solve disagreements with swords like a true gentleman? Unfortunately, this didn't go over well with his father, who was footing the bill and probably expecting more library time and less pub crawling. After a year of what we can generously call exploration at Bonn, his father decided it was time for Karl to buckle down and get serious. So, he packed him off to the University of Berlin, where the academic discipline was known to be as rigid as a Prussian soldier. Here, Marx immersed himself in philosophy, studying the works of Hegel with the kind of intensity most people reserve for binge-watching their favorite Netflix series. But Marx was drawn to more than just Hegelian dialectics. He was captivated by the bustling intellectual scene of Berlin, where radical thinking was the order of the day. Despite his rebellious streak, Marx was a student with ambition and intellect to spare. But he also had a tendency to clash with authority, which is like saying a cat has a tendency to nap. He joined the Young Hegelians, a group that was less about toga parties and more about challenging the status quo through sharp, critical thought. This is where Marx really started honing his revolutionary ideas, debating politics and philosophy with a fervour that was as fiery as his personality. It wasn't long before Marx's academic pursuits took a back seat to his burgeoning passion for radical thought. This didn't exactly endear him to his professors, who were probably hoping he'd stick to the syllabus rather than question the whole foundation of society. But Marx was never one to follow the script. In 1841, he completed his doctoral thesis, which was, surprise, surprise, controversial. It focused on the differences between Democritus and Epicurus, ancient philosophers who were probably never discussed over the dinner table in Trier. His thesis was deemed too radical by the University of Berlin, so he submitted it to the University of Jena instead, where they were presumably more open to revolutionary ideas, or just less picky about their academic submissions. Despite his academic credentials, Marx wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms into the world of academia. He found himself at odds with the conservative Prussian establishment, which viewed his ideas as dangerously subversive. With an academic career looking less likely than a snowstorm in July, Marx turned to journalism. He began writing for the Rheinische Zeitung, a liberal newspaper in Cologne, and quickly rose to the position of editor. His articles were as sharp and incisive as his debates, challenging the political and economic structures of the time with a fervour that would have made his professors break into a cold sweat. In 1843, the Prussian government, not exactly known for its love of freedom of the press, shut down the Rheinische Zeitung. Marx found himself at a crossroads. But instead of retreating into obscurity, he doubled down on his revolutionary fervour. He married Jenny von Westphalen, his childhood sweetheart and the love of his life, who was every bit his intellectual equal. Together they moved to Paris, a city that was, at the time, a hotbed of political and philosophical thought. It was here that Marx met Friedrich Engels, the man who would become his lifelong collaborator and co-author of the Communist Manifesto. Paris was the perfect backdrop for Marx's burgeoning ideas. The city was alive with debate, revolution, and the kind of intellectual fervour that made Berlin look like a sedate book club. Engels, a fellow radical thinker, was the perfect partner in crime. Together, they began developing the ideas that would eventually reshape the political landscape of the world. But that's a story for another day. For now, suffice it to say that Marx's early life was a mix of intellectual curiosity, rebelliousness, and a dash of youthful exuberance. He was a man who was never content to accept the world as it was, always questioning, always challenging, always ready to debate the night away in a smoky pub. Moving to Paris in 1843 was like swapping a black and white film for Technicolor, at least for Karl Marx. The city was the intellectual equivalent of a mosh pit, teeming with revolutionaries, philosophers, and enough political pamphlets to wallpaper a small country. You could say Paris was the epicenter of radical chic, and Marx was more than ready to dive in head first with his quill sharpened for battle. Now, by this point, Marx was no stranger to poking the bear that was the establishment, but Paris offered a whole new audience eager for his brand of intellectual insurrection. The air was thick with ideas, debates, and probably a fair bit of pipe smoke. It was here that Marx met Friedrich Engels, a partnership that would become as legendary as Lennon and McCartney, but with more politics and fewer catchy tunes. Engels was the son of a wealthy industrialist, an irony that wasn't lost on either of them. But instead of following the family business of making money, Engels was more interested in understanding why the rest of the world didn't have any. Their shared disdain for capitalism was like the intellectual equivalent of finding someone who also hates pineapple on pizza. This wasn't just a meeting of minds, it was the beginning of a bromance that would change the course of history. The economic context of Paris at the time was ripe for their revolutionary theories. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and while it was making some people obscenely rich, it was also making life for the working class about as pleasant as a root canal. Factory conditions were appalling, wages were laughable, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots was wider than ever. Marx and Engels saw this as the perfect backdrop for their burgeoning ideology, which wasn't just about criticism, but about envisioning a new social order. Paris, however, wasn't just a playground for intellectuals, it was also a stage for Marx's somewhat less triumphant career moves. Take his stint as a newspaper editor, for instance. It was a job that sounded promising, but ended about as well as a soufflé in an earthquake. He took over the reins of a radical newspaper called Vorwärts, which, despite its name meaning forward, was soon moving backward thanks to government intervention. The paper became a target for the authorities, who were about as fond of Marx's brand of journalism as a cat is of a vacuum cleaner. The French government, under pressure from its Prussian counterparts, shut it down in 1845, leaving Marx once again on the hunt for a platform. But if there's one thing Marx was never short on, it was determination. He and Engels continued to work on their theories, turning their attention to a book that would eventually become the Communist Manifesto. This was the beginning of something big. Think of it as the indie film that would eventually become a blockbuster. They were convinced that capitalism was a ticking time bomb, a system that exploited workers and concentrated wealth in the hands of the few. Their goal was nothing less than to ignite a revolution that would dismantle the whole capitalist edifice. And while Marx's ideas were as radical as they come, they were also grounded in the economic realities of the time. He wasn't just spinning tales of utopia, he was analyzing the cold, hard numbers. Take the average wage of a factory worker, for example. It was a pittance, barely enough to keep a family fed, let alone save for a rainy day. Meanwhile, the factory owners were raking in profits faster than they could count them. Marx saw this as a fundamental injustice, one that couldn't be resolved by mere tweaks to the system. Of course, Marx's time in Paris wasn't all work and no play. The city was a cultural feast, and even a revolutionary needs to eat. Marx and Jenny, his ever-supportive wife, mingled with the artistic and intellectual elite, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Heinrich Heine. The poet who could skewer societal norms with a couplet faster than you can say bourgeoisie. It was a heady time, full of late-night debates and grand visions of a better world. But just as things were heating up, the French government decided they'd had enough of Marx's revolutionary zeal. In 1845, Marx was expelled from Paris, a move that was about as surprising as finding out water is wet. He relocated to Brussels, where he and Engels would continue to refine their ideas and lay the groundwork for the political upheaval they hoped to instigate. So there you have it. Marx's Parisian adventure was a whirlwind of ideas, friendships, and yes, a few career missteps. But it was also a crucial chapter in the story of a man who wasn't content to just write about change, he wanted to be the catalyst for it. As Marx and Engels continued their work in Brussels, they were more convinced than ever that the status quo was ripe for a shake-up, and they were just the duo to do it. But that's a tale for another day, as the wheels of history keep turning and the revolution waits for no one. So, Marx and Engels had been kicked out of Paris, packed their revolutionary bags, and headed to Brussels. But now let's fast forward a bit to the real meat and potatoes of Marx's life, London. Ah, London, home of fog, fish and chips, and for Marx, financial misery that would make even a Dickensian pauper raise an eyebrow. In 1849, Karl Marx moved his family to the British capital hoping for a fresh start. What he got, instead, was a new chapter in his ongoing struggle against the cold, hard realities of 19th century economics. Think of London as the final stage in a video game, only instead of battling dragons, Marx was up against the beast of poverty. He was like a rock star with a hit record that hadn't dropped yet, living in obscurity while crafting his magnum opus, Das Kapital. Now, when I say poverty, I mean it in the most Dickensian sense. We're talking about a man whose financial situation was less stable than a one-legged table. The Marx family lived in Soho in a cramped apartment on Dean Street, number 28 to be precise. Picture this. 7 people crammed into 2 rooms, and the rent was a hefty £2 a month. That's about $20.50 in today's money, which might not sound like a fortune, but when your income is as unpredictable as British weather, it's a serious burden. Marx's money woes were a constant companion, much like his ever-present cigars. His main financial lifeline was none other than Friedrich Engels. Ah, Engels, the Robin to Marx's Batman, or maybe the sugar daddy of socialist thought. Engels was working in his family's cotton mills in Manchester, which was about as ironic as it gets, considering they were railing against capitalism. Yet, Engels was sending Marx an average of $350 a year, equivalent to around $40,000 today. Not exactly winning the lottery, but certainly the difference between starvation and survival. Despite the financial strain, Marx was nothing if not committed to his work. He was the kind of guy who would have been the last one to leave the library if he could afford the membership fee. His work ethic was relentless, bordering on obsessive. He spent endless hours in the British Museum reading room, poring over economic texts and historical data like a detective piecing together a case. Friends joked that if Marx could monetize his passion for reading, he'd be richer than the Queen. But let's not paint too romantic a picture here. Marx's dedication came with a price, and that price was mostly paid by his family. His wife Jenny was often left to deal with the day-to-day realities of their financial situation. They pawned belongings, dodged debt collectors, and endured the heartbreak of losing 3 children to illness and malnutrition, which was sadly all too common in Victorian London. It's a stark reminder that behind every great man, there might be a woman wondering how to keep the lights on. Speaking of harsh realities, Marx's health was far from robust. He suffered from a litany of ailments, including liver problems, rheumatism, and carbuncles. Yes, carbuncles. Those painful, pus-filled boils that sound like something straight out of a medieval medical textbook. His maladies were made worse by stress, poor diet, and the kind of hygiene practices that would make a germaphobe faint. Yet, through it all, Marx remained undeterred. He was like a dog with a bone when it came to his intellectual pursuits. Das Kapital was his passion project, a tome that sought to dissect capitalism with surgical precision. The first volume was published in 1867, a full 18 years after he moved to London. Talk about playing the long game. The book was dense, detailed, and about as light a read as a legal contract. But for Marx, it was his life's work, the culmination of years of study and thought. Did Das Kapital turn Marx into a household name overnight? Not quite. The book didn't exactly fly off the shelves, but it did lay the groundwork for future thinkers, revolutionaries, and anyone with a bone to pick with the capitalist system. Marx was playing the long game again, sowing seeds of thought that would blossom into movements long after his death. As for Marx's family life, it was a mixed bag. He was a devoted father, albeit one who was often distracted by his work. His daughters adored him, and he affectionately called them the little birds. They were raised in an environment that encouraged debate and critical thinking, which was about as unconventional as you could get at the time. Jenny, his wife, was his staunch supporter, editor, and partner in every sense of the word. Their love story was as enduring as it was tumultuous, fraught with the pressures of financial instability and personal loss. In the end, Marx's life in London was a testament to his resilience and tenacity. It was a life filled with contradictions. A revolutionary living in poverty, an intellectual giant struggling with personal demons, a family man torn between his loved ones and his mission. But through it all, Marx never wavered in his belief that the world could be a better place, a belief that continues to inspire and provoke to this day. As we leave Marx in his London study, feverishly working on his next big idea, remember that his story is far from over. The wheels of history keep turning, and Marx's ideas are about to take on a life of their own. But that's a tale for another day, as we dive deeper into the legacy of a man who dared to question the status quo and dreamed of a world where justice wasn't just a word, but a way of life. And so we find Marx, perched in his London study, jotting away with the kind of fervour that could give caffeine a run for its money. But let's hit rewind for a second, back to 1848, a year that was about as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Europe was in the throes of revolution, and Marx, along with his trusty sidekick Friedrich Engels, was about to drop the Communist Manifesto into this simmering pot of political chaos. Talk about timing. Let's dive into the manifesto itself. Published in February 1848, it wasn't exactly a bedtime story. It was more like a rallying cry wrapped in a pamphlet. Clocking in at a concise 23 pages, it was the kind of read you could tackle in a single sitting, assuming you weren't distracted by, say, a revolution outside your window. The duo crafted a document that was part political treatise, part economic analysis, and entirely incendiary. It opened with the now iconic line, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism." Not exactly subtle, but then Marx and Engels weren't known for understatement. The manifesto laid out the fundamental principles of Marxism, with a focus on class struggle, the abolition of private property, and the overthrow of capitalist society. It was like a blueprint for a future that, to many, seemed just within reach. The text was peppered with phrases that were as memorable as they were provocative, urging the proletariat, the working class, to rise against their bourgeois oppressors. It was a call to arms for the exploited masses, promising a new world order where workers would own the means of production. In theory, it was a utopian vision. In practice, it was the kind of stuff that kept monarchs and capitalists up at night. Now, the reception of the manifesto was as mixed as a bag of trail mix. In some circles, it was hailed as a revolutionary masterpiece, while in others it was dismissed as radical nonsense. It spread across Europe with the help of clandestine printing presses, smuggled in the linings of coats and hidden in the hollowed-out pages of innocuous books. Marx and Engels were the intellectual equivalent of rock stars, albeit ones who were more likely to be found in a dingy pub than a glittering concert hall. But despite its bold vision, the manifesto didn't exactly trigger an instant worldwide revolution. Instead, it served as a framework for the uprisings that were already brewing. In places like France, Germany, and Italy, the year 1848 saw waves of revolutionary fervour sweep through the streets. The air was thick with the cry for change, and while Marx wasn't out there waving a flag or barricading streets, his ideas were very much in the mix, a kind of intellectual fuel for the fire. Here's where we hit the myth versus reality snag. Many people envision Marx as a sort of Che Guevara figure, all fiery rhetoric and frontline action. In reality, Marx was more likely to be found hunched over a desk than brandishing a rifle. His role was that of a thinker, a theorist whose battlefield was the page. While others were out there, risking life and limb for the cause, Marx was penning essays, drafting pamphlets, and shaping the ideological underpinnings of the movement. But don't mistake this for a lack of conviction. Marx was deeply committed to his vision of a classless society. He just expressed it in ink rather than blood. His influence was profound, shaping the revolutionary discourse and offering a vocabulary for those who sought to topple the old order. Yet, the messy reality of revolution often strayed far from the romantic ideals he outlined. The upheavals of 1848 were marked by violence, division, and ultimately a return to the status quo in many regions. The workers' utopia was more mirage than reality, a tantalizing promise that was always just out of reach. As for the economic context, Europe was in the midst of seismic changes. The Industrial Revolution had reshaped the landscape, creating wealth for some and misery for many. Factory workers toiled in appalling conditions, their lives dictated by the relentless rhythm of the machines. The disparity between rich and poor was as glaring as the factory whistles that punctuated their days. The manifesto struck a chord precisely because it addressed these harsh realities with a vision that promised liberation from the drudgery and exploitation. Yet, even as Marx and Engels were crafting their revolutionary missive, they were acutely aware of the challenges ahead. They knew that change on the scale they envisioned wouldn't come easy. The entrenched powers of the day were about as eager to relinquish control as a toddler clinging to a security blanket. The bourgeoisie, with their wealth and influence, weren't going to simply step aside because of a well-written pamphlet. In the end, the Communist Manifesto was both a product of its time and a harbinger of things to come. It captured the zeitgeist of an era teetering on the brink of transformation, even as it sowed the seeds for future movements and ideologies. Marx and Engels had crafted a document that was part prophecy, part polemic, and entirely revolutionary. As Europe grappled with the aftershocks of 1848, Marx continued his work, ever the theorist, ever the critic, always questioning, always challenging. His ideas were taking on a life of their own, reverberating through the halls of power and the hearts of the disenfranchised. But the story of Marx and his enduring legacy is far from over. The wheels of history keep turning, and the revolution, as they say, is still to come. Stay tuned, because the next chapter is just around the corner, and it's bound to be a wild ride. As the 19th century bid its adieu and the 20th century strutted onto the stage, Marx's ideas were about to embark on a globe-trotting adventure that would have made Phileas Fogg envious. From the dusty streets of Russia to the bustling cities of China, the spectre of communism was no longer just haunting Europe. It was setting up camp, complete with its own ideological tent. It's as if the Communist Manifesto had grown legs and decided to take a world tour with a few pit stops for revolution along the way. Let's start with Russia, where Marx's ideas found fertile ground amid the chaos of World War I and the crumbling Romanov dynasty. Enter Vladimir Lenin, a man who read Marx like it was a sacred text and then decided it needed a bit more Russian flair, much like adding borscht to the menu. Lenin took Marx's theories and gave them a distinctly revolutionary twist, leading to the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Suddenly, Marxism wasn't just theory. It was political praxis, complete with its own regime and a snazzy new name, Marxism, Leninism. Now, here's where the myth-busting comes in. Many folks assume Marx would have been thrilled with the Soviet experiment, but let's hit pause. Marx, who had spent a lifetime railing against the very idea of a centralized state, might have had a few choice words for Lenin's interpretation. The Soviet Union, under Lenin and later Stalin, bore more resemblance to a bureaucratic juggernaut than the stateless, classless society Marx envisioned. The irony is thicker than a Moscow winter. The man who theorized about freeing the masses inadvertently became the intellectual father of a regime that would, at times, oppress them. It's a bit like writing a cookbook and finding out someone's used it to make a culinary crime against humanity. But Marx's ideas were nothing if not adaptable, and they weren't done globe-trotting yet. In China, Mao Zedong took Marxism for another spin, this time with a side of agrarian revolution. Forget the industrial proletariat, Mao's focus was the peasantry. His version of Marxism, which emerged victorious in 1949, was like a remix of the original familiar, yet distinctly different. It's as if Marx's symphony had been reimagined as a folk song, with the same notes but a radically different tempo. And let's not forget the West, where Marx's ideas found their way into the ivory towers of academia. In universities from Berlin to Berkeley, Marx was the intellectual equivalent of a rock star, minus the groupies, but certainly with enough theorists to fill a stadium. His works became the backbone of critical theory, influencing everything from sociology to literary criticism. Marx was the man who could inspire both revolutionaries and scholars, a testament to the breadth of his intellectual legacy. But, as we wade through the 20th century, we also stumble upon some of the more outlandish interpretations of Marxism. From the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, who seemed to take the class struggle concept to an extreme that would have made even Marx wince, to the various cults of personality that sprouted up like weeds, claiming Marx as their ideological progenitor. It's as if everyone wanted a piece of the Marxist pie, but some were more interested in the crumbs of power than the actual recipe. Yet, through all the interpretations and misinterpretations, Marx's ideas continued to resonate. They were the intellectual spark for labour movements, civil rights struggles, and anti-colonial uprisings. Wherever there was inequality, Marx's critique of capitalism found an audience. His theories offered a framework for understanding economic exploitation and political disenfranchisement, a lens through which to view the world's injustices. But hold the applause for a moment, because there's another layer to this story that's as ironic as it is poignant. You see, Marx spent his life critiquing a system that he himself struggled to escape. His personal finances were a continual disaster, as consistent as a broken clock. The man who critiqued capitalism with surgical precision was also its victim, constantly hounded by debt and dependent on the generosity of Engels to keep the wolves at bay. It's like railing against the evils of fast food while eating a burger because it's the only thing you can afford. And what about Marx in pop culture? Well, he's been everything from a punchline in sitcoms to a source of inspiration for artists and musicians. Whether it's Rage Against the Machine infusing Marxist ideas into their lyrics or filmmakers using his theories as a backdrop for dystopian narratives, Marx's influence is as pervasive as it is varied. He's the intellectual equivalent of a Swiss army knife, endlessly useful, perpetually relevant, and sometimes a bit unwieldy. As we round out this tale of Marx and his legacy, let's reflect on the enduring myths and often ignored realities. Marx was not a prophet, nor was he a demagogue. He was a thinker whose ideas were as complex as the world he sought to understand. His legacy is a testament to the power of ideas to transcend their origins and reshape the contours of history. Marx's contributions were like seeds scattered on the winds of time, some landing in fertile soil, others on barren ground, but all carrying within them the potential for change. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, if there's one thing Marx teaches us, it's that history is a living, breathing tapestry, one that weaves together the threads of past, present, and future. His ideas invite us to question the status quo, to challenge the systems that govern our lives, and to envision a world that might be different from the one we know. Marx dared to dream of a future where justice wasn't just a lofty ideal but a tangible reality, and that dream, flawed and fraught as it may be, continues to inspire. As we close the book on Marx, let's do so with a nod to his indomitable spirit and the enduring relevance of his critique. Whether you see him as a hero or heretic, a visionary or a villain, one thing's for sure. Karl Marx left an indelible mark on the world, and his ideas will continue to spark debate, ignite passions, and, yes, haunt the corridors of power for generations to come. So, here's to Marx, the man who dared to dream big and think even bigger, a legacy as complex and compelling as the man himself. The first thing you notice, standing there on the dusty plains of ancient Troy, is the smell. It's a potent mix of sweat, earth, and the unmistakable tang of bronze. You're a Trojan soldier in the 12th century BC, and while the legends will someday sing of heroes and epic battles, your day-to-day life is less about glory and more about grit. Forget the poetic verses of Homer for a moment, and let's dive into the nitty-gritty of your world. Your mornings begin at the crack of dawn, not because the muse of war has inspired you, but because training waits for no one. The training regime is relentless, a brutal cycle of physical drills designed to prepare you for the unforgiving realities of combat. You spend hours practicing with a spear, perfecting the art of the charge. This isn't just about brawn, it's about survival. Your life depends on the precision of your spear thrust, the strength of your shield arm, and your ability to move as one with your fellow soldiers. Now, let's talk diet. Romantic tales might not mention it, but your meals are humble. If you're lucky, you'll have bread, olives, and maybe a bit of cheese. Meat is a luxury, reserved for special occasions or the wealthy elite. In times of war, even these simple staples become scarce. So, you learn to be grateful for whatever fills your stomach and fuels your fighting spirit. Your living conditions? They aren't quite what you'd call comfortable. As a soldier, you're housed in barrack-like structures, sharing close quarters with your comrades. Privacy is a foreign concept, and the constant proximity to others means you're fully aware of who snores the loudest or who has the smelliest feet. It's all part of the camaraderie, they say. But don't be fooled. There are days when the lack of personal space could drive you mad. Economically, being a soldier isn't exactly a ticket to wealth. Let's talk numbers. The cost of your equipment alone is staggering. A bronze sword could set you back a few oxen, and a decent shield might cost the same. If you're not from a wealthy family, financing your gear means putting your family into debt or working extra hard during peacetime to save up. War is costly, not just in lives but in resources, and your pay as a soldier is modest at best. It's a financial juggling act, balancing your duties with the need to provide for your family. And let's not forget the economic implications of war itself. When Troy is at war, the entire city feels the strain. Trade routes are disrupted, goods become scarce, and prices skyrocket. Your family, back home, faces the harsh reality of this economic pressure, often having to make do with less. The romantic notion of going to war for glory and honor fades against the backdrop of these harsh economic truths. Despite these challenges, serving as a soldier is a source of pride. You're part of something larger than yourself, defending the great city of Troy. And while you might not be a hero immortalized in song, your role is crucial. But let's keep it real. The life of a Trojan soldier is far from the glamorous image painted by epic tales. It's a tough existence, shaped by sweat, sacrifice, and a healthy dose of practicality. As you stand on that ancient plain, spear in hand, you realize that while legends will always capture the imagination, it's the gritty reality that defines your days. Now, let's shift our gaze from the grit of your daily life to the grand chessboard of ancient politics. As a Trojan soldier, your existence is a cog in a much larger machine, cranking away in the political landscape of the 12th century BC, a landscape that would put any modern soap opera to shame. Troy, strategically perched on the cusp of the Aegean and the entrance to the Black Sea, is more than a mere city. It's a shimmering gem in the crosshairs of trade routes, a veritable jackpot for any power keen on controlling the flow of goods and wealth. This prime real estate makes Troy no stranger to enmity and alliances, each as fickle as the Mediterranean weather. Picture this. You, a foot soldier, are an unwitting pawn in an epic clash of civilizations. The Greeks, with their eyes on Troy's strategic position and wealth, are not just enemies but economic rivals. They, too, want a slice of the lucrative trade pie that Troy enjoys. And you're out there on the battlefield, feeling the weight of histories and economies colliding on your very shoulders. The politics of the time are as complex as a labyrinth, with Troy caught between the ambitions of mighty Mycenaean Greece and the sprawling Hittite Empire to the east. It's a geopolitical sandwich, and you're the filling. Politics isn't just about who controls what. It's also about the stories we tell. Enter propaganda, the ancient world's version of social media spin. The powers that be in Troy and their Greek adversaries are masters of the tale. They know that winning hearts and minds is as crucial as winning battles. The myth of the Trojan War, made famous by later poets like our buddy Homer, is saturated with these tales, a heady brew of gods, heroes, and inevitable destiny. But if you're a soldier, the only destiny you're contemplating is whether you'll come home with all your limbs intact. In reality, the glorious image of war is often more propaganda than truth. While the bards sing of Hector and Achilles, your reality is the mud underfoot, the clang of bronze on bronze, and the stark terror that accompanies each skirmish. The allure of myth is undeniable. It paints a picture of honor and heroism. But let's be honest here. The everyday grind of a soldier seldom feels like a ballad. It's more like a dirge, and not one you'd choose for karaoke night. Just as today, back then, leaders understood the power of narrative. The tales woven about the Trojan War serve as both a warning and a rallying cry, designed to unite the populace under a common cause or enemy. Yet, these tales conveniently gloss over the inconvenient truths. The economic strain, the political machinations, and the personal sacrifices of soldiers like you. Speaking of sacrifices, let's not forget the economic toll of this political posturing. Wars are expensive. Your pay as a soldier might be scant, but the cost of outfitting an army is monumental. We're talking about tens of thousands of drachmas for a campaign. The treasury's bleeding gold faster than a warrior with a severed artery. The city of Troy, though wealthy, isn't immune to the financial strain. Every arrow fired and every spear sharpened adds to the tab. And all the while, trade disruptions mean less money flowing into the city's coffers. Yet, despite the economic burden, the city must maintain its alliances. Troy's relationship with its neighbours is a delicate dance of diplomacy, trade agreements, and military pacts. The Hittites are an ally, which is as comforting as having a tiger guard your sheep. Sure, they're on your side for now, but alliances in this era are as stable as a sandcastle in the surf. So here you are, a soldier in the midst of all this political intrigue, propaganda, and economic turmoil. You're not just fighting for Troy's survival, you're battling for its relevance in a world where power is the ultimate currency. And while the myths will remember the heroes and their deeds, the reality of your existence, filled with mud, blood, and a healthy dose of cynicism, will fade into the background. As the sun sets over the plains of Troy, casting long shadows over the city walls, you reflect on the stories you've been told and the truths you've seen. You know that the legends will live on long after you've laid down your spear. But as you trudge back to your barracks, the weight of your armour and the heavier burden of history rest on your shoulders. There's no song for the soldier who quietly returns to his bunk, dreaming not of glory but of survival. The war might be epic, but your life? That's a saga in its own right, filled with its own kind of heroism. And as you lie there, staring at the wooden beams above, it's hard to ignore the sheer logistical nightmare that is ancient warfare. The poets might wax lyrical about Achilles' rage or Hector's nobility, but here's a reality check. No one sings about the quartermasters. Yet, without them, the whole operation would collapse faster than a sandcastle at high tide. Let's start with the basics, getting an entire army from point A to point B. We're talking about thousands of men, each carrying their own gear, plus the added weight of military provisions. Picture this. The Trojan plain isn't just a backdrop for heroic duels, it's a transit hub for an army on the move. The average soldier could march about 20 miles a day, and that's without considering the constant stops to make sure the entire group stays coordinated. The Greeks, for instance, weren't just popping over for a weekend skirmish. Nope, they were setting up shop for a decade-long siege, and that requires serious planning. Speaking of planning, let's talk supplies. While Homer might have us believe that the gods provided everything necessary, the truth is far less divine. Each army had to be self-sufficient, carrying enough food, water, and equipment to sustain them. And here's a killer stat. An army of 10,000 men might need around 30 tons of food per day. So while you're dreaming of a feast fit for a hero, logistics officers are busy ensuring that you get your daily ration of bread and olives. It's not glamorous, but it's the difference between a well-fed soldier and a mutinous mob. And then there are the animals. Oh yes, don't forget the four-legged soldiers. Horses, mules, and oxen were the unsung heroes, hauling heavy loads and pulling chariots across the rugged terrain. A chariot might sound thrilling, but maintaining these beasts was no easy feat. They needed feeding, grooming, and, like any high-maintenance vehicle, constant repairs. So while you might envision yourself charging into battle like a demigod, most days you're likely to be found patching up a chariot wheel or feeding a stubborn mule. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk tactics. Forget the Hollywood brawls with everyone flailing swords willy-nilly. Ancient warfare was more akin to a deadly chess match than a bar fight. Think phalanxes, tightly packed squares of soldiers moving as one. It's like synchronized swimming, with more blood and fewer sequins. This formation required discipline and trust. A single soldier breaking ranks could spell disaster for the entire unit. The Trojans, like the Greeks, relied heavily on these formations. The aim was simple. Keep your line unbroken while poking the enemy with your spears. Picture a wall of shields and spears advancing slowly, pushing the enemy back. It's not the chaotic melee you might imagine. In fact, it's a controlled advance, with each soldier playing a part in the larger strategy. and when the battle turns into a slog, it's often down to who can maintain formation longest. But let's not kid ourselves. Even the best-laid plans can go awry. The terrain itself often played the role of an unpredictable adversary. The rolling hills around Troy, the narrow passes, these weren't just scenic backdrops. They could make or break a campaign. A sudden rainstorm could turn the ground into a quagmire, stalling chariots and foot soldiers alike. And nothing kills a battle strategy faster than Mother Nature deciding it's time for a downpour. The mythical heroes might have had divine favor, but the average soldier was left grappling with the whims of weather and terrain. It's a stark reminder that while strategy is crucial, adaptability is king. The ability to pivot quickly in the face of unforeseen challenges can be the difference between victory and an embarrassing retreat. And speaking of retreats, let's tackle the thorny issue of morale. Sustaining an army isn't just about rations and tactics, it's about keeping spirits high in the face of adversity. The Greeks might have had their legendary heroes, but what really kept them going was a mix of camaraderie, duty, and, let's be honest, a fair amount of coercion. Desertion was a constant threat, and the penalties were severe. No one wants to be on the business end of a general's wrath, especially when that general thinks he's got Zeus on speed dial. But here's a twist. While the poets focused on individual duels, the truth was that most soldiers never got close to their enemy. Many battles were decided by missile troops hurling javelins and shooting arrows from a distance. It was less about honor and more about who could rain down the most projectiles without getting skewered in return. It's a far cry from the image of two titans clashing on the battlefield. However, when combat did get up close and personal, it was brutal and swift. Forget the drawn-out duels of legend, real battles were quick and chaotic. The goal was to break the enemy line, and once that happened, it was every soldier for himself. And in this chaos, the veneer of heroics often slipped away, revealing the raw, primal struggle for survival. So, as you tuck yourself into your modest bunk, consider the stories of glory and valor. Sure, they make for great fireside tales, but on the ground, it's a different beast altogether. As a Trojan soldier, you're not just a pawn in a grand narrative, you're an integral part of a complex, gritty reality. The myths may live on in song and story, but it's the sweat and strategy, the grit and grind, that truly define the art of war. And while the bards might immortalize the heroes, remember, it's the anonymous foot soldiers like you who make those legends possible. And that, my friend, is a saga worth telling. And speaking of sagas worth telling, let's delve into the social tapestry of ancient Troy, where the myth of the mighty city meets the gritty reality of its social structure. You see, life in Troy wasn't just about swords and shields. No, it was a complex tapestry woven with class distinctions, gender roles, and the ever-present hustle for survival. First off, let's debunk the idea that everyone in Troy was living in palatial luxury. Sure, the city boasted grand walls and impressive architecture, but not everyone was sipping wine in golden goblets. The social hierarchy was steeper than the walls of Troy itself. At the top were the elites, noble families, and the ruling class who dictated politics and economy from their cushy seats of power. If you were born into this echelon, congratulations. Your biggest worry was likely which toga best complemented your eyes. But for the average soldier, like you, life was a bit more Spartan, if you'll pardon the pun. You sat in the middle tier of society, sandwiched between the wealthy and the slaves. Your status as a soldier offered a certain respect, but let's not get carried away. You were still expected to toe the line, follow orders, and pay your dues. And unlike the aristocrats, you couldn't exactly opt out of battle because you had a prior engagement with a particularly fine amphora of wine. Now, let's talk about the unsung heroines of ancient Troy, the women. Forget the damsel in distress trope. Trojan women were integral to the social fabric. While men were out waving swords, women were running the show back home. They managed households, raised children, and were often skilled in crafts that contributed to the city's economy. High-born women could wield significant influence, sometimes even maneuvering through the political landscape as deftly as their male counterparts. Take, for instance, the legend of Helen of Troy. Sure, she's often painted as the ultimate femme fatale, but the reality was likely more nuanced. Women like Helen, if she existed, were players in the Game of Thrones long before it was cool. They were pawns, yes, but sometimes they were also queens, moving pieces on the board with a cunning that would put any modern strategist to shame. But let's not romanticize too much. For the majority of women, life was about survival, not soap operas. Archaeological findings suggest that textiles were a significant part of Troy's economy, and women were at the heart of this industry. Weaving wasn't just a household chore, it was a crucial economic activity. And while the poets might have ignored these heroines of the loom, their contributions were essential to Troy's prosperity. Speaking of contributions, let's address the unsweetened reality of class distinctions. Your spot on the social ladder was largely determined at birth, an ancient version of the proverbial silver spoon. If you were born into wealth, you had access to resources, education, and status. But if you were born into a family of farmers or labourers, your path was a bit rockier. The notion that anyone could rise to greatness was as mythical as a centaur, and yet the allure of social mobility persisted. The chance to elevate one's status, even slightly, drove many to join the ranks of the military. After all, the battlefield was a place where a man could earn honour and, occasionally, land or wealth. But let's be real, the odds of striking it rich through warfare were about as high as Zeus popping down for a chat over tea. In the context of warfare, class distinctions could be both a burden and a boon. The elites might have had the best armour and weapons, but they also had the most to lose. For the common soldiers, the camaraderie of shared hardship often blurred social lines. In the thick of battle, it didn't matter if the man next to you was a noble or a farmer. What mattered was that he had your back. Yet, when the dust settled, reality reasserted itself with the harshness of a winter wind. The social hierarchy was a relentless machine, grinding away at dreams of equality. It dictated everything from who you could marry to the clothes you wore. And while the myths might celebrate the heroics of individuals, the truth was that most Trojans lived and died within the confines of their class. This brings us to another myth, ripe for debunking, the notion that Troy was a utopian paradise of harmony and equality. Archaeological findings tell a different story. Excavations at Hisarlik, the modern site of ancient Troy, reveal a city that was sophisticated but not immune to the inequities and struggles common to ancient societies. The remains of various dwellings suggest a clear division between the haves and the have-nots, with the former enjoying spacious homes while the latter squeezed into modest abodes. And let's not forget the slaves, the silent backbone of Troy's economy. They performed the grueling tasks that kept the city running, from agricultural labour to domestic chores. Slavery was an accepted reality, an institution woven into the very fabric of society. It was a grim reminder that while legends speak of heroism, the truth often lay in the hands of those toiling in obscurity. So, as you prepare to face another day in the dusty plains of Troy, consider the stories that have shaped your world. The myths are seductive, offering tales of glory and grandeur, but beneath the surface lies a reality marked by struggle and sacrifice. The social structure of Troy was as complex as its politics, a tapestry of ambition, duty, and survival. As the sun rises over the ancient city, casting its golden hue over the walls, you steel yourself for the challenges ahead. You are a soldier, an integral thread in the grand tapestry of Troy, and while the legends may sing of kings and warriors, it's the everyday lives of people like you that truly tell the story of this ancient city. There's no grand finale here, just a continuation of the saga that is life in Troy, a tale that will unfold with every new dawn. And so it is, as you stand on the dusty plains of Troy, where the sun rises over a city steeped in legend, that you find yourself pondering the legacy of your time as a Trojan soldier. What does it mean to be part of this ancient tapestry, woven with threads of heroism, hardship, and history? As the myths of Troy have been passed down through the ages, they've undergone a transformation as dramatic as any epic tale. Let's kick things off with a bit of myth-busting. The Trojan War, often romanticized as a grand narrative of heroes and gods, likely wasn't as Homer would have you believe in his Iliad. Sure, tales of Achilles' wrath and Hector's nobility are the stuff of legend, but let's put on our reality check glasses for a moment. This wasn't a war fought purely for glory or love. It was a clash of economic and geopolitical interests. Troy's strategic position was a prime real estate for controlling trade routes, a fact that had powers like Mycenaean Greece eyeing it with both envy and ambition. Forget the wooden horse for a moment. The real prize was the control of wealth and influence. Now, when it comes to legacy, let's acknowledge the undeniable allure of the Trojan War myth. It's the ancient world's equivalent of a blockbuster franchise, complete with larger-than-life characters and epic battles. But here's the twist. While these stories have been passed down through millennia, they've often overshadowed the gritty reality faced by the ordinary soldiers. Men like you, who slogged in the mud, bore the brunt of battles, and whose names were lost to history as the spotlight shone on their more illustrious counterparts. Modern interpretations, from Hollywood epics to literary retellings, have played a vital role in shaping our understanding of these soldiers. They've added layers of drama and romance, sometimes at the expense of historical accuracy. Take, for example, the portrayal of warriors clad in polished armor, charging gallantly into battle. The reality? Most soldiers wore simple gear-bronze helmets and linen armor, if they were lucky. And let's not forget the dreaded spear, the soldier's staple weapon, far from the flashy swords of cinema. It was a practical choice designed for reach and efficiency, not for show. Yet, there's a reason these myths endure. They speak to something fundamental about human nature, the desire for stories that transcend the mundane and elevate our understanding of the past. The Trojan War, with its mix of divine intervention and human folly, offers a narrative that is both cautionary and captivating. It's a testament to the power of storytelling, how it can preserve the essence of an era even as it embellishes the details. As we delve into the legacy of the Trojan soldier, let's not forget the economic and political forces that shaped their world. The cost of war was staggering, not just in human lives, but in resources. The treasury of Troy, while formidable, wasn't bottomless. Wars drained the coffers, strained trade, and left a lasting impact on the city's prosperity. Yet, this economic context often gets overshadowed by tales of heroics and epic duels. The politics of the era were no less complex. Troy's alliances and enmities were as shifting as the sands beneath your feet. The Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and other regional powers played a high-stakes game of diplomacy and warfare, with Troy often caught in the crossfire. These geopolitical dynamics were the true engines of history, driving events far more than any single hero's deeds. And here's a sharp observation to chew on. While the myths may celebrate individual valor, the reality is that warfare was a collective endeavor. It was the coordination, discipline, and sheer tenacity of the rank-and-file soldiers that often turned the tide of battle. The phalanx, with its disciplined rows of spearmen, was less about individual glory and more about collective strength. In this light, the anonymous soldier becomes a hero in his own right, a vital cog in the machinery of war. As we reflect on the portrayal of Trojan soldiers through the ages, it's clear that modern media has both illuminated and obscured their legacy. On one hand, it has brought these ancient warriors to life, sparking interest and imagination. On the other hand, it has sometimes simplified the complex realities they faced. The challenge lies in balancing the romance of legend with the harsh truths of history. So, what does this mean for our understanding of the Trojan soldier's legacy? Perhaps it's a reminder that history is a tapestry of stories, both grand and humble. It's about the interplay of legend and reality, the myths we create and the truths we uncover. As you stand on the plains of Troy, spear in hand, you're part of this rich tapestry, a testament to the enduring power of the past to shape our present. In conclusion, the legacy of the Trojan soldier is one of paradox, a blend of fact and fiction, heroism and hardship. The myths have immortalized their deeds, but it's the reality of their lives that truly tells the story of Troy. As the sun sets over the ancient city, casting its golden light on the walls, you realize that while the legends will live on, it's the everyday soldiers, the unsung heroes, who are the real heartbeat of history. And that, my friend, is a legacy worth remembering. If you were an emperor, with the ambition of a rock star and a bank account to match, you'd probably start thinking about building something that screams, "I'm not just any emperor. I'm the Third Emperor." And that's exactly what the Mughals did. Welcome to the Mughal Empire, the historical equivalent of the biggest kid on the playground who also happens to own the playground equipment. Our story kicks off in 1526 with Babur, a Central Asian ruler who decided he was done with the cold weather and endless mountain landscapes. He wanted something warmer, more fertile, and with significantly fewer goats. Into India, stage left. Babur swept down from the north, conquering the Delhi Sultanate like he was just checking off items on his weekend to-do list. By 1530, he had established the Mughal Empire, a sprawling behemoth that stretched from Kabul to the fertile plains of northern India. Now, when you control an empire that's basically the size of Western Europe, you've got options. You could, I don't know, focus on agriculture or maybe improve infrastructure. But why do that when you can construct architectural wonders that make everyone else feel inadequate? And so began the Mughal obsession with building things that were about as subtle as a peacock at a pigeon party. The Mughals had a knack for turning architecture into political propaganda. They were like the ancient influencers, except instead of Instagram posts, they used marble and sandstone. Their palaces and forts weren't just places to live or defend, they were statements of absolute power and divine right. And when it came to temples of opulence, they had the economic clout to back it up. Estimates suggest that during Akbar's reign in the late 16th century, the Mughal Empire's GDP was about 25% of the world's economy. That's like owning a quarter of the global monopoly board and having free hotels on Park Place. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just about showing off. The architecture served as a cultural glue, knitting together the diverse peoples and languages of the empire under a unified aesthetic. Temples, mosques, and mausoleums became the social media of the day, conveying messages of power, unity, and occasionally, "Hey, look what I can build." This wasn't just vanity. It was a strategic move to ensure that the empire's diverse subjects saw themselves reflected in the grand narrative of Mughal greatness. Speaking of greatness, let's not forget Humayun, Babur's son. Humayun had a knack for losing and regaining his throne like it was a game of musical chairs. But he also had a keen eye for art and architecture, planting the seeds of what would eventually bloom into the empire's architectural golden age. His tomb in Delhi, completed in 1572, was a prototype of Mughal architecture, a harmonious blend of Persian, Turkish and Indian styles that set the stage for future Mughal masterpieces, including the world-famous Taj Mahal. Humayun's tomb was India's first garden tomb, a sprawling complex that whispered the Mughal motto, "Go big or go home." And then there's Akbar, the third Mughal emperor who took the empire to unprecedented heights. Picture a ruler who was part philosopher king, part warrior, with a dash of savvy diplomat thrown in for good measure. Akbar didn't just build for the sake of building, he constructed Fatehpur Sikri, a city that stood as a testament to his ambition and vision. Built between 1571 and 1585, it was a short-lived capital that nonetheless showcased the Mughal flair for integrating art, religion, and politics. Imagine a city where every building was part of a grand conversation between faiths and cultures, because that's exactly what Akbar intended. Of course, all this architectural grandeur wasn't just about flexing and making other empires feel like they were living in cardboard boxes. These structures were about legacy, a way to ensure that centuries later people would still be talking about you. And let's be real, those Mughals knew how to leave a lasting impression. Take Shah Jahan, the fifth Mughal emperor, who decided that building the Taj Mahal as a mausoleum for his favorite wife was a perfectly reasonable way to express grief, costing a king's ransom, an estimated 32 million rupees at the time, roughly translating to a cool $1 billion today. The Taj Mahal is the crown jewel of Mughal architecture and a testament to the empire's wealth and sophistication. The Mughals didn't just stop at palaces and mausoleums. They were also big fans of gardens, big symmetrical gardens that would make any modern landscape architect weep with envy. These weren't just pretty spaces, they were meticulously planned, symbolic representations of paradise on earth. The Mughal gardens were designed to reflect the Quranic description of paradise, complete with flowing water and lush greenery, creating a sensory experience that was as much about spirituality as it was about aesthetics. But before you get too misty-eyed about this architectural fairy tale, let's remember the cold, hard realities. While the Mughals were erecting their marble masterpieces, the empire was also a complex web of power struggles, economic exploitation, and social unrest. The grandeur of the Mughal structures was often built on the backs of countless labourers, whose hard work and sacrifice were the invisible scaffolding of these monumental projects. It's easy to get lost in the romantic allure of these splendid structures and forget the immense human cost and the often draconian taxation that funded them. The decline of the Mughal Empire in the mid-18th century marked the end of an era, as internal dissent and external pressures chipped away at the once mighty edifice. By the time the British East India Company came knocking, the once grand empire was a shadow of its former self. Yet the architectural wonders endured, standing as both a reminder of past glories and a testament to the empire's indelible impact on the cultural and historical landscape of the Indian subcontinent. So, the next time you see an image of the Taj Mahal or a Mughal garden, remember, these aren't just pretty pictures. They are the echoes of an empire that understood the power of architecture as a tool of political might, cultural dominance, and personal legacy. They are the ultimate proof that when it came to the Mughals, bigger really was better. Now, let's zoom in on the Taj Mahal, a monument so iconic that it might as well be the cover model for Famous Buildings Monthly. Constructed between 1632 and 1653, the Taj Mahal isn't just a pretty face, it's a technical masterpiece that would make even the most seasoned civil engineer's slide rule spin. You know you're dealing with some serious architectural swagger when the emperor decides to spend about 32 million rupees on a tomb. That's the kind of money that makes you question if Shah Jahan was buying a mausoleum or a small country. Let's talk numbers. Over 20,000 workers were involved in this project. Picture that. A workforce larger than the population of some small towns today, all labouring under the scorching sun, chipping away at marble like their lives depended on it. And in a way, they did. These workers, craftsmen and artists came from various sections of the empire and even beyond. Artisans from as far as Europe joined forces with Indian craftsmen, creating a melting pot of talent and skill. It was like the ultimate medieval job fair, minus the networking luncheons. But don't get too misty-eyed over the camaraderie here. This wasn't a labour of love, it was a labour of labour. The Taj Mahal is often touted as a symbol of eternal love, a poetic gesture from a heartbroken emperor to his late wife Mumtaz Mahal. But let's not forget the other side of the story, the human cost. The workers toiled in conditions that would make a sweatshop look like a day spa, all under the watchful eyes of overseers who probably weren't handing out Employee of the Month awards. And while we're on the subject of costs, let's talk about the economic strain. Imagine the imperial treasury as a giant piggy bank, and Shah Jahan just smashed it open for one lavish project. That kind of financial recklessness would make any economic advisor shake their head in disbelief. Logistics, of course, were another layer of complexity. The white marble was quarried from Makrana, over 200 miles away. Transporting it was a logistical nightmare that involved elephants, oxen, and a lot of patience. And you thought your morning commute was rough. The final product, however, was worth every logistical headache. The Taj Mahal's design employed a perfect blend of symmetry and geometry, or so the legend goes. But hold your horses, symmetry lovers, because the Taj isn't as flawless as it seems. The minarets, those elegant towers flanking the main structure, actually lean slightly outward. This isn't some architectural quirk. It was a deliberate design choice to prevent them from falling onto the tomb in case of an earthquake. So, while the Taj might look like it could grace a geometry textbook, it's got its share of built-in safety features that are more practical than perfect. Speaking of myths, let's tackle the biggest one, the supposed perfect symmetry of the Taj Mahal. The main building and its reflection in the pool do seem like a mirror image, but look closely and you'll find the mausoleum is not entirely symmetrical. The tombs of Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal are not identical. Shah Jahan's is larger and less ornate, breaking the symmetry to accommodate his larger-than-life ego, or maybe just his larger-than-life stature. Either way, it's a reminder that even the most romantic stories have their practical footnotes. And then there's the tale of Shah Jahan's deep, undying love. Sure, it's a compelling narrative, an emperor so heartbroken that he built a monument to express his grief. But let's be real for a moment. This was a man who had multiple wives and concubines. Mumtaz might have been his favourite, but she was by no means his only love interest. The romanticised tale of a love so pure it defies death is, let's say, a bit romanticised. What we have here is a potent mix of love story, vanity project, and political statement, all wrapped up in one stunning package. The Taj Mahal also served as a bold political statement, a declaration of imperial power and sophistication. It was a way for Shah Jahan to flex his architectural muscles and assert his dominance in a world where showing off your bling was the name of the game. The structure's blend of Persian, Islamic, and Indian architectural styles reflected the Mughal Empire's eclectic cultural tapestry. It was like the empire's LinkedIn profile, showcasing its diverse influences and sophisticated taste. Yet, while the Taj Mahal stands as a testament to Mughal grandeur, it also underscores the empire's underlying vulnerabilities. The immense financial resources funneled into its construction highlighted the empire's wealth, but also its economic fragility. The project strained the imperial coffers and contributed to the economic challenges that would eventually bring the Mughal Empire to its knees. It's a classic tale of overreach, a reminder that even the mightiest can crumble under the weight of their own ambition. In the end, the Taj Mahal is more than just a pretty postcard. It's a multifaceted symbol, embodying both the splendor and the contradictions of its time. It represents the pinnacle of Mughal architectural achievement, yet it also reveals the harsh realities of imperial politics and economics. It's a poetic love story with a footnote of pragmatism, a masterpiece built on the backs of thousands, and a reminder that history is never just black and white, or in this case, marble white. So the next time you admire the Taj Mahal, take a moment to appreciate not just its beauty, but the complex tapestry of human endeavor and ambition woven into its very stones. Switching gears from the serene marble of the Taj Mahal to the robust red sandstone of the Red Fort, we find ourselves at the very heart of Mughal power. The Red Fort, or Lal Killa, wasn't just any fortress. It was the Mughal equivalent of the Pentagon, Buckingham Palace, and the Ritz-Carlton rolled into one. Built between 1638 and 1648 by Shah Jahan, the same chap who brought us the Taj Mahal, this architectural giant stretches a whopping 2.5 kilometers around and sits like a crown jewel in Delhi. But this wasn't just a vanity project, it was a nerve center, where the empire's pulse could be felt in the clanging of swords, the rustle of silk robes, and the clinking of countless coins. Now, you might think, why on earth would an empire already boasting the Taj Mahal need yet another colossal construction project? Well, in the high-stakes game of Mughal Monopoly, there was always room for another hotel on Boardwalk. The Red Fort was both a statement of power and a strategic military bastion. Picture this, a fortress with walls so thick they practically laughed in the face of cannonballs. It was like the Mughal version of a keep out sign, except it was built to withstand armies, not just nosy neighbors. The Red Fort was more than just a fortress. It was a palatial hub of luxury. Inside those intimidating walls lay an opulent city of marble and red sandstone, complete with lush gardens, ornate halls, and even a private mosque. The Diwani-Am, or Hall of Public Audience, was where the emperor would address his subjects, while the Diwani-Khas, or Hall of Private Audience, was the exclusive club where the real deals went down. And let's not forget the Rang Mahal, where the emperor's wives and concubines lived in opulence that would make a Kardashian envious. These spaces weren't just about comfort. They were designed to dazzle, to impress, to overwhelm any visiting dignitary with the sheer grandeur of the Mughal court. But let's talk economics, shall we? Constructing this mighty bastion wasn't cheap. The Red Fort cost an estimated 10 million rupees. Just imagine the scandal if an audit had revealed how much of that was spent on gilding the Peacock Throne alone. Oh yes, the famed Peacock Throne, a seat so lavishly adorned with gold and precious gems that it was rumoured to be worth twice as much as the Taj Mahal itself. It was the ultimate bling, the kind of furniture piece that screams, "I'm the boss." This brings us to the paradox of Mughal economics, a veritable empire of contradictions. On one hand, you had emperors living in unprecedented luxury, surrounded by gold leaf and gemstones, while on the other, the empire's resources were being stretched as thin as a sheet of beaten gold. The Mughals had a knack for spending money like water, yet their economic system depended heavily on a revenue structure that was, shall we say, less than equitable. The empire's wealth was largely built on a feudal-like agrarian system where peasants bore the brunt of heavy taxation. It was like living in a dazzling palace built on a foundation of IOUs. Here's the kicker. While the architectural wonders of the Mughals were designed to last forever, their economic strategies were not. The lavish spending habits that funded these projects often outpaced the empire's ability to replenish its coffers. It was a classic case of spending money you don't have to impress people you don't like. Well, maybe not entirely, but you get the drift. There was an undeniable allure to the Mughal court, with its promises of prosperity and grandeur. But beneath the surface, the cracks were beginning to show. Let's not sugarcoat it. While the Red Fort was a marvel of Mughal engineering and a testament to their architectural prowess, it was also a monument to the empire's overreach. The same financial mismanagement that allowed for such grand constructions would later contribute to the empire's decline. It's a tale as old as time: build big, spend big, and hope the revenue catches up before the debt collectors do. As we stand in the shadow of the Red Fort's towering walls, it's easy to romanticize the splendor and forget the struggles. These structures, while breathtaking, were also built on the backs of laborers who toiled day and night under the weight of imperial ambition. It was a world of stark contrasts, where the emperor's peacock throne glittered in opulence, while the common man struggled to eke out a living. And yet, in its heyday, the Red Fort was not just a fortress. It was the heartbeat of an empire, echoing with the footsteps of history. So, as we continue our journey through the Mughal architectural landscape, let's remember that these grand designs were more than just feats of engineering. They were reflections of the empire's very soul, ambitious, extravagant, and ultimately vulnerable to their own magnificence. The Red Fort stands as a testament to an era where the lines between power and excess were as blurred as the intricate patterns adorning its walls. And in the grand tapestry of history, it's these contradictions that make the Mughal story so endlessly fascinating. And speaking of grandiose statements in stone, let's glide over to the Jama Masjid, the crowning jewel of Mughal mosques. Constructed under the unerring eye of Shah Jahan, this behemoth of a building took 6 years to complete, from 1650 to 1656, and cost a staggering 1 million rupees. That's a number with enough zeros to make even the most seasoned accountant break into a cold sweat. But hey, when you're the emperor of one of the richest empires in the world, you can afford to dream big, very big. Nestled in the heart of Old Delhi, the Jama Masjid was designed to be the Mughal Empire's spiritual flagship, an architectural mic drop if ever there was one. Picture this, a mosque so vast it could accommodate 25,000 worshippers at a time. That's like trying to fit every resident of a mid-sized town into a single prayer session. Talk about a logistical quagmire. Imagine the chaos of organizing that many people, all jockeying for a spot to lay their prayer mat. It must have been like trying to direct traffic at the world's largest family reunion. Now, why would Shah Jahan want to build something so massive? Well, in the world of Mughal architecture, bigger wasn't just better, it was essential. The Jama Masjid wasn't merely a place of worship, it was a statement, a declaration of spiritual and temporal power, a symbol of the emperor's divine right to rule. It was as if Shah Jahan was saying, "Look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair." Or at least, look at this mosque and admit that it's really, really impressive. And impressive it was, with its sprawling courtyard and towering minarets reaching for the heavens. But let's not get too swept up in the grandeur without asking some tough questions. Did the spiritual intent of the Jama Masjid get a bit lost amidst all the opulence? Good question. While the mosque was undoubtedly a place of worship, it was also a monumental exercise in imperial branding. The Mughals were masters at blending faith with power, and the Jama Masjid was no exception. It was a place where the emperor could be seen as both a devout Muslim and a ruler of unparalleled might, a leader who could command the resources to build something that seemed to touch the sky. And what about the economic implications of building such a colossal structure? Constructing the Jama Masjid was no small feat. The project required an immense workforce, including artisans, labourers, and architects, all of whom had to be paid. The economic drain on the Mughal treasury was significant, but not crippling, at least not at the time. Yet, the labourers who toiled under the hot sun might have had a different perspective. While the elite basked in the glory of their achievements, the workers likely saw only the harsh conditions and relentless demands. It's a classic story of ambition versus reality, where the dreams of the few are realized on the backs of the many. And let's discuss the social significance of such grand religious structures. The Jama Masjid wasn't just about prayer, it was a community hub, a place where people from all walks of life could gather. It played a pivotal role in reinforcing the social fabric of the empire, providing a space where diverse groups could come together under the unifying banner of Islam. In a way, it was like a giant social network, minus the hashtags and selfies, where people could connect, share news, and feel part of something greater than themselves. Yet, for all its spiritual intentions, the Jama Masjid also stood as a testament to the Mughal penchant for excess. The mosque's staggering size and opulent design were perhaps less about religious devotion and more about the Mughal desire to leave an indelible mark on the world. It was as much about legacy as it was about faith, a legacy that would ensure Shah Jahan's name was etched in history long after his empire had crumbled. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer architectural prowess that went into creating the Jama Masjid. With its red sandstone and white marble facade, the mosque is a harmonious blend of Persian and Indian styles, a testament to the Mughals' eclectic taste. The massive courtyard, the grand gateways, and those towering minarets, each element was meticulously crafted to inspire awe. And awe it did inspire, drawing visitors from across the empire and beyond, each one leaving with the indelible impression that they had witnessed something truly extraordinary. But despite the Jama Masjid's grandeur, we must remember that it also represents the duality of Mughal architecture, the delicate balance between spiritual aspiration and worldly ambition. It's a stunning example of how the Mughals used architecture to convey messages of power and piety, a reminder that in the world of the Mughals, the line between the sacred and the secular was often blurred. So, as we stand in the shadow of the Jama Masjid, let's remember that this grand mosque is more than just a place of prayer. It's a symbol of an empire's might, a testament to its artistic and architectural genius, and a reminder of the complex interplay between faith and power. And as we continue our exploration of Mughal architecture, let's keep in mind that these structures, while magnificent, are also monuments to the empire's grand ambitions and the human cost that came with them. And with that, we leave the Jama Masjid behind, not with conclusions, but with questions that linger like the echoes of 1,000 footsteps in its vast courtyard. Questions about the true cost of grandeur, both in marble and in human toil, and whether the pursuit of legacy justifies the means. As we journey onward, the Mughal story continues to unfold, revealing layer upon layer of history, each more fascinating than the last. As the dust settles from our whirlwind tour of Mughal architecture, it's time to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, like stepping back from a masterpiece to appreciate the whole canvas. You see, the Mughals weren't just building for the here and now, they were crafting a legacy intended to echo through the ages. Spoiler alert, they succeeded. These architectural wonders didn't just influence their contemporaries, they set the stage for generations of builders and dreamers across the globe. Take the Taj Mahal, for instance. It didn't just raise the bar for mausoleums, it launched it into the stratosphere. The Taj became the ultimate expression of love and loss, a postcard-perfect symbol of romantic excess that architects around the world have tried and often failed to emulate. Those gleaming white domes and intricate carvings became the gold standard for any ruler worth their salt who wanted to leave behind more than just a footnote in the annals of history. Even today, the Taj Mahal is the yardstick against which all other architectural love letters are measured. It's like the stairway to heaven. Of monuments, everyone tries to play it, but few can truly capture its magic. Meanwhile, the Red Fort's influence spread far beyond the Mughal Empire's borders. Its robust design and strategic placement inspired fortresses and palaces from Persia to Europe. The concept of a fortified palace complex that could double as a seat of government became the blueprint for rulers looking to combine military might with political power. It wasn't just about building walls. It was about crafting an image of unassailable strength, a fortress of solitude for emperors who knew that sometimes the best defense is a really, really big defense. But while the Mughals were setting architectural trends, they were also sowing the seeds of their own decline. As the empire grew, so did its appetite for extravagance, and soon enough the economic policies that had once fueled its rise were dragging it down. The lavish spending on palaces, mausoleums, and mosques began to outpace the empire's revenue like a high-flying credit card that finally reaches its limit. By the mid-18th century, the once mighty Mughal Empire was teetering on the brink of collapse, with internal dissent and external pressures gnawing away at its foundations like termites in a wooden palace. The British East India Company, ever the opportunist, saw a golden opportunity in the struggling empire's woes. The Mughals, who had once been the masters of the Indian subcontinent, found themselves reduced to pawns in a much larger geopolitical game. By 1857, the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was dethroned and exiled, marking the official end of the Mughal dynasty. It was a sobering reminder that even the grandest empires are not immune to the forces of history. Yet, while the empire itself crumbled, the Mughal architectural legacy endured. Those magnificent buildings, symbols of power and ambition, became relics of a bygone era, testaments to human creativity and the audacity of vision. They stand today as reminders that while emperors come and go, bricks and mortar can outlast even the grandest of ambitions. The Mughals may no longer rule, but their architectural genius continues to inspire awe and admiration, transcending the boundaries of time and space. In a way, the Mughal story is a poignant reflection on the nature of legacy itself. It's a tale of visionaries who dared to dream big, to build monuments that would outlive them by centuries. But it's also a cautionary tale about the perils of excess and the fleeting nature of power. The Mughals remind us that while empires may fall, their cultural impact can be as enduring as the stones they leave behind. So, as we wrap up our journey through the Mughal architectural marvels, let's take a moment to reflect on the lessons they offer. These buildings, with their intricate designs and grand ambitions, challenge us to think about what we leave behind. They remind us that greatness is not just about what we achieve in our lifetimes, but about the legacies we create for future generations. And perhaps most importantly, they whisper a timeless truth to anyone with ears to hear, that while history may forget the names of emperors, it will forever remember the beauty and genius of their creations. In the end, the Mughals built more than just structures. They crafted narratives in stone, stories that speak of an empire's rise and fall, its triumphs and tragedies. And as long as those stones stand, the story of the Mughals and their extraordinary architectural legacy will continue to captivate and inspire. So, here's to the Mughals, the original rock stars of architecture, who proved that while time may erode empires, true artistry is immortal.